Chapter 3200. Usually, when the child was about to cry, her man would try his best to get rid of the child. If he didn't hand the child over to the nanny, he would hand the child over to her. In any case, she didn't have the patience to coax the child. She was so stunned that she even ignored the increasingly dangerous look in Wuxia's eyes. The man looked up. His voice was low, but his tone was strong enough. "Get out." "Why?" The woman spoke with conviction, but she was a little angry. "My son was bullied, and I haven't even gotten an explanation. What right do you have to chase us out?" The woman's husband seemed to have some background. At least, it was apparent from his aura. From the moment he entered the house, it was obvious that he was proud of his status. Hence, his attitude was very arrogant. After all, his son was bullied, and he wanted to get an explanation for his son. Hence, he wanted to see who had bullied his son to this extent. Once he got home, he locked himself in his room and ignored everyone. His heart ached when he saw this. Hence, he thought that no matter who it was, he had to punish them harshly and show them who was boss. This family also lived in Xianghu. This man's status was indeed quite high. He was the executive director of a real estate developer and was quite wealthy. However, he didn't realize that he was also living in Xianghu. In a territory where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, as a neighbor, his background was not to be trifled with either. However, most men were arrogant and flamboyant. Naturally, they overlooked this problem. Perhaps he was too conceited. After all, he was able to achieve what he had today. Ordinary people couldn't compare to him. No matter how high his status was, how could he compare to him? Hence, the man was aggressive and said arrogantly, "Today, I'll put these words out there. You can either get your two sons, who are in the wrong, to come out and apologize to my son. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." When Wuxia heard this, he found it interesting. He passed the little Yueyao to Wuchen. Then, he slowly stood up from the chair and walked to the man. The difference in height made it difficult for the man to breathe. His height of 1.8 meters was like the weight of Mount Tai to the man who was less than 1.7 meters. The man had no choice but to raise his head to look at him. Wuxia looked down at him with a cold gaze. "As a father, I know my two sons' personalities better than anyone else. If they did something wrong, I will definitely correct them and make them apologize. But I know my sons. They won't bully other children." The man couldn't help but feel a little guilty, but he still insisted on keeping up appearances. You weren't there? You said that you wouldn't bully her, but did you see it with your own eyes? So, did you see it with your own eyes?" The man was at a loss for words for a moment. If this matter fell into the hands of ordinary people, it would also be a very troublesome trifle. After all, no one was present at the scene. Everyone had their reasons, and everyone felt wronged. However, the woman did not give up and said, "I saw it with my own eyes. Your child is grabbing my son's collar fiercely, like a little lion. It looked like it wanted to eat someone. I saw it, how can it not count?" Chapter 3201. However, the woman said, "My son has everything he wants. We've already bought everything he wants. Why would he care about your lousy toy?" Yu was furious. Lousy toy? This toy couldn't be bought with money. It was a limited edition, and this toy for little Yueyao was a version that he had meticulously designed. It was one of a kind. He had always given his sister the best, but in this woman's mouth, it was just a lousy toy. You say he doesn't care about it, but your son does. Yu walked over and tugged at the corner of Wuxia's shirt. She snorted and said, "Daddy, don't stoop to the level of a shrew like her. Just chase them out. It's a waste of time to talk to them." Unspoken suppressed her anger and said, "Please get out." The man beside her didn't say anything. After all, Mu Yaja was standing in front of him. His aura was suppressed by so much that he didn't dare to make a fuss. However, the woman continued to pester endlessly, "Do you know who my husband is?" These words were really condescending. Mu Yaja retorted, "Do I need to know? You'd better know who my husband is. Don't think that just because you live in Xiangdi like us, you have a high status. My husband is the executive director of Wanku Real Estate. You know about Wanku Real Estate, right? It's one of the top 500 companies in the world." When Mu Yaja heard this, he sneered in his heart. There would always be a few frogs at the bottom of the well who would jump out and embarrass themselves. He wondered who it was. So it was Wanku's director. Speaking of which, even Wanku's CEO, Wang Chuanda, had to humbly address him as Chairman Mu when he saw him. He was just a director, yet he was so arrogant. Where did he get his confidence from? Xiao Yichen also knew about Wanku. He had even met Wanku's CEO, Wang Chuanda. In front of Daddy, he also had a fawning face. Why was this man so arrogant? He said coldly, "He's just a mere director of Wanku. I advise you not to embarrass yourselves here." Yu was surprised and interrupted, "Mu Yichen, you're using idioms one after another. You've improved." Mu Yichen blushed and ignored him. He was in a fit of anger. Get lost if you know what's good for you. It was too embarrassing to be chased out of the house by a child. The man behind couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and said, "Today, I was thinking that since we're neighbors, it's not a big deal. Let your child apologize, and we'll make the big deal small, and the small matter will be resolved. But from what I see, you guys don't seem to have any intention of apologizing at all. Then don't blame me for being rude." Unspoken was curious. "How do you want to be impolite?" The man was about to say something when footsteps came from outside the door. The group of people turned around curiously and saw Lu Jinyu walking over with a document in his hand. When the man saw him, his expression changed and his eyes widened in surprise. His attitude was respectful. "CEO Lu, why are you here?" His words surprised Unspoken. They knew each other. When Lu Jinyu saw him, he was also very surprised. "Director Zhang, why are you here?" The man was also a little confused. Chapter 3202. Now that the market was in a slump, the global financial system was deteriorating, and the industry was in crisis, it was very difficult for the government to approve land. Without a strong background, it was difficult to get a share of the profits from the government. For a large and powerful corporation like the Wanku Group, they had to bow and lower their posture when they went to the government. But there was nothing they could do. The government refused to give them land. Coincidentally, Wanku coveted an office building, so he took a fancy to the land in the new city. However, this land was auctioned by Jianghu, and they planned to develop the financial street. Therefore, Wanku sent him to communicate with Lu Jinyu, one of the people in charge of Jianghu Corporation, and finally got some ideas. "President Lu, what are you?" Lu Jinyu was also confused by the situation in front of him. Seeing Mu Yaja standing aside with a cold expression, he smiled and said to the man, "President Zhang, you can't be in such a hurry, right? Didn't I tell you that I'm in charge of this development project? What are you doing?" He thought that Director Zhang had come all the way here to talk to Mu Yaja about the project. Director Zhang was even more confused and asked, "President Lu, what's your relationship with this man?" "Huh?" Lu Jinyu smiled. "Don't you know him?" "I don't know him. I only know that he lives here." "Does Director Zhang also live in Xiangdi Walk?" "Yes." Lu Jinyu introduced. "This is the chairman of Jianghu Corporation, our boss, President Mu. I didn't expect you to live in the same villa area. I might as well introduce you to him." As soon as he said that, the man was completely stunned, and cold sweat broke out on his back. What did you say?" The man pointed at Wuxia and said gloomily, "You said this is, I made it very clear just now." Lu Jinyu didn't have the patience to repeat himself a second time. The man was completely frozen on the spot, not knowing how to deal with the situation. Never in his wildest dreams would he have guessed that the legendary mysterious chairman of Xingyu Financial Group, Wuxia, was actually living in the same villa complex as him. He also didn't expect that by accident, he seemed to have offended an extraordinary person. Lu Jinyu also sensed that something was wrong and asked in confusion, "What's going on?" "Uncle Jinyu." Yu ran over and Lu Jinyu immediately picked him up. The little munchkin wrapped his arms around his neck and pointed at the man as he said, "Their whole family came to us and said that we bullied their son. They even wanted us to apologize. You're really unreasonable." The woman didn't understand what was going on. She took a step forward and was about to retort when the man was quick to react. He knew how to judge the situation and immediately pulled her behind him. "Hubby, what are you doing?" the woman asked impatiently. "Honey, let me introduce you," the man swallowed his anger and said in a low voice, "This is the chairman of Xingyu Financial Group, President Mu." The woman was stunned. She had heard her husband mention the Xingyu Financial Group. It was said that the chairman of the Xingyu Financial Group had a powerful background and was famous. Who would have thought that it was him? Such an illustrious figure was actually such a young man. She couldn't keep her face straight and couldn't help but feel uneasy. Earlier, she was still shouting so fiercely, but now, she was beaten so badly that she didn't even dare to breathe loudly. But if she had to immediately lower her head and bow her head, she wouldn't be able to back down from the table. Chapter 3203. However, if she were to lower her head and bow immediately, she wouldn't be able to get out of this embarrassing situation. If she immediately behaved humbly, then wouldn't her swaggering earlier be a joke? She couldn't embarrass herself like that. The woman's face was a little dark. This kind of situation was really too awkward, so she just stood there and said nothing. The man was also uneasy. He was afraid that if he said another word, he would offend them even more. Hence, he kept his cool and stood nervously at the side. When Xiao Yichen saw this, he snorted coldly. Why else would this society be so snobbish? If it weren't for his daddy's superior status, would they be so timid? This society was ruthless. It didn't make sense to some people who were superior to others. When Lu Jinyu saw this, he said coldly, "Why aren't you getting lost?" When the man heard this, he felt as if he had been granted amnesty. Just as he was about to flee with his wife and son, he suddenly thought of something and turned back to ask carefully, "CEO Lu, then, this matter won't affect Wanku and Xingyu's development project, will it?" Lu Jinyu sneered and said, "Whether this matter affects or not depends on our boss's mood. However, if you don't give me a clear explanation, I think you won't be able to keep your position as the executive director." How could this be? The man quickly begged for mercy and said, "CEO Lu, there's a misunderstanding. You must plead for me. How would I know that I'm lucky enough to live in the same villa area as CEO Mu? Don't make a fool of yourself here, hurry up and scram." Lu Jinyu's attitude became very cold. When the man heard this, he didn't dare to say another word and hurriedly left. After such an unpleasant incident, Yu and Xiao Yichen were still sulking. "Jinyu." "Yes." "Continue to follow up on the proposal with Wanku. However." "Boss, don't worry. Do you think I don't understand what you mean? I'll handle this matter properly." Lu Jinyu was a perceptive person. With one look from Wuxia, he immediately understood his intentions. "Put the documents on the table." Lu Jinyu placed the document on the table. Just as he put it down, his eyes secretly drifted in the direction of little Yueyao. His mouth was watering. He. "Boss, can I hug the little princess?" *0****. Wuxia's eyes were cold. "No." Lu Jinyu's face fell. "Why?" I knew you had ulterior motives. Wuxia snorted. Deliver documents? I think your motives are not pure, right? I'm just hugging. Boss, how can you be so stingy? When I have a daughter in the future, I'll let you hold her too. However, a certain man was very principled and said, I have my own daughter. I don't care about other people's. His stance was clear. However, since Lu Jinyu had come and failed to carry the little princess, how could he return empty-handed? He was thick-skinned and called him boss repeatedly. Finally, after much coaxing and pestering, he got his wish to carry the soft and squishy ball. When he carried little Yueyao, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen stood on either side of her. They were prepared to snatch her back the moment she cried. Chapter 3204. Lu Jinyu finally got what he wanted and carried Yueyao in his arms. Although the way he carried the child was a little inexperienced, it was still considered standard. Previously, the reason why Yueyao kept crying and throwing a tantrum, other than being unable to recognize him, was probably because the way he carried the child was not very correct. After returning home, he consulted the mother around him and learned how to carry a child. Now, he was a little more confident. He carried her carefully, and the little princess reluctantly gave him some face. She did not cry and throw a tantrum like the last time. Instead, she widened her big eyes curiously and looked at him as if she was sizing him up. However, after carrying her for a while, he seemed to be despised by the little princess. Little Yueyao suddenly looked in Wuxia's direction and stretched out her chubby little hands, asking for a hug. This action of hers made Wuxia feel extremely satisfied. See? The child can recognize people. That's good. He liked it when his daughter only recognized him and no one else. That way, no one else could covet his daughter. Wuxia said, Yueyao doesn't want you to carry her. Give her to me. Lu Jinyu was a little reluctant when he said that. He pulled a long face and felt a little aggrieved. However, Yueyao struggled fiercely and kicked her little legs as if she despised him. Lu Jinyu was also afraid that something would happen. No matter how unwilling he was, he could only let Wuxia carry the little princess away. Of course, after that, the family of 5 said that they were going for a walk in the park. A certain someone shamelessly insisted on tagging along, hoping that when Wuxia got tired of carrying her, he would have an excuse to carry her for a while. However, it did not occur to him that Wuxia was full of energy. Even if he carried the little princess for a few hours, his arms would not feel tired at all. When he carried Yueyao in his arms, his heart felt heavy. He could not bear to put her down, so how could he feel tired? Hence, after shopping for an entire hour, Lu Jinyu could only watch helplessly from the side. Did he want to hug her? That was basically wishful thinking. Actually, Lu Jinyu didn't care much about children in the past. Hence, when he was in his 20s, he didn't think of getting married. He wanted to find a woman to get married and have children. To him, whether it was a boy or a girl, he wasn't particularly obsessed. However, little Yueyao was born. The moment he saw her, his heart bloomed with love for the little princess. He was even more determined to have a daughter in the future. However, Wuxia had also said that instead of coveting his daughter, he might as well get married and have a child himself. The problem was this marriage something that could be done just because one wanted to? In order to get married, one had to find love first, right? Love was too extravagant. It could only be met, and it had nothing to do with preparation. Even though he was mentally prepared, that person just didn't appear. Could it be that he had to find a random woman just to give birth to a daughter? Yu Yu encouraged Yunshishi and said, Mommy, why don't you introduce Auntie Xiao Shui to Uncle Jinyu? Auntie Xiao Shui is so pretty and she's a good match for Uncle Jinyu. No. Yunshishi and Lu Jinyu said in unison. This was a tacit understanding. Yunshishi's reason was, I'm not a matchmaker. Outsiders can't interfere in matters of the heart. However, Lu Jinyu said, I don't like it when others introduce my girlfriend to me. It's fine if both parties are satisfied, but if they're not, it'll hurt our friendship. Chapter 3205. After taking a walk home, Lu Jinyu also said goodbye. After returning home, he called the vice president of Wanku. He meant to say that there was no problem with Wanku and Xingyu Financial Group's development project, but they would have to change the director. Change the director? There was only one executive director in Wanku. If they wanted to replace him, they would have to fire the original director. The vice president immediately asked him if someone had offended him. Lu Jinyu didn't say much and ended the call hastily. When this matter reached the ears of Zhang Wansan, the executive director of Wanku, he immediately felt uneasy. He originally thought that this matter would be left unsettled. He didn't expect that the man would pursue it to the end. However, Wanku's attitude was very clear. The value of this case was immeasurable. If they missed it, they were afraid that their future cooperation with Xingyu would face difficulties. Wanku didn't want to offend Xingyu, nor did they want to lose this reliable source of cooperation, so they wanted to fire Zhang Wansan. How could they let this go? When Zhang Wansan heard this, he begged his grandfather and grandmother to find connections. He didn't sleep the entire night. Wanku also expressed that he could stay in his position, unless Xingyu said that they would no longer make things difficult for Wanku because of this matter. Therefore, Zhang Wansan didn't go to the company the next day, thinking about how to resolve this matter. Both husband and wife realized the seriousness of this matter, so they had a good discussion. In the end, the man suggested that they should personally make a statement. Therefore, the couple carried their gift bags and braced themselves to go to the door, only to find that there was no one at home. Wuxia only had one weekend off a week, when he could put aside his company's affairs and rest for a day. On this day, Yu said that the fourth phase of the Fairy Tale Valley theme park project had been completed and that she wanted to experience it. Therefore, the family of 5 got ready and went out. Before leaving, Unspoken confirmed the belongings she would bring, including milk bottles, milk powder, diapers. After confirming that everything was ready, the family set off in a grandiose manner. The 4 of them had specially changed into the parent-child outfits that Yu had designed previously. They were white casual shirts, and on the back of each shirt, there was a cartoonish portrait of each of them. This was personally designed by Yu, and it was very lifelike. Fairy Tale Valley was very popular, and it was the most famous theme park in the country. During the weekends and holidays, the flow of people was especially high. However, Yu was not worried about this problem. With just a phone call, he successfully received a VIP card from the ticketing center. With the VIP card, he did not need to line up and was given priority to enter the park. He also did not need to line up for any of the events and could enjoy himself to his heart's content. The last time he came to Fairy Tale Valley was for his 7th birthday. However, there was an accident on the way and he couldn't enjoy himself. This time, the 2 little guys agreed to play a few more games. Just as they entered the park, Unspoken saw a staff member at the entrance. He was wearing a thick costume and was holding a cartoon balloon in his hand. There were about 50 balloons in his hand, clustered together, and it was very impressive. It also made for a beautiful scene at the entrance. Unspoken walked over and asked for the price. The staff member said that it was 100 yuan each, and VIP cards could receive it for free. Chapter 3206. Unspoken raised her head and saw that Wuxia was nowhere to be seen. She scanned the crowd and finally noticed him. He was tall and slender. Even though he was wearing a casual shirt, a black jazz hat, and a pair of spectacles on the bridge of his nose, such a simple outfit still made him stand out in the crowd because of his noble temperament. He stood in front of a dreamy shop and quietly waited for his turn. When it was his turn, he bought 4 cotton candies. One was pink, one was blue, one was white, and one was yellow. He held 2 cotton candies in each hand and walked towards her. When he walked over, the passers-by kept looking at him and whispering excitedly. Oh my God, look! That man wearing sunglasses, he looks like a superstar. I heard that Fairy Tale Valley signed Hua Jin as their spokesperson not long ago. I heard that the official website released news that Hua Jin will be attending an event at Fairy Tale Valley as a guest. Could it be today? Are you kidding? Is Hua Jin that tall? He's definitely not a superstar because I've never heard of such a person. In the set, Hua Jin was going through the script when he suddenly sneezed elegantly and said gloomily, "Who's talking bad about me?" The crowd kept getting congested. It was unknown whether it was because the tourists were hiding or because there were many people approaching Wuxia, but the area where the pram stopped was so congested that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Many little fangirls even secretly raised their phones and aimed the camera in Wuxia's direction to take pictures secretly. Click click click. Some tourists forgot to turn off the flash. Unspoken felt that she was being secretly photographed and looked in the direction of the light. Taking the cotton candies from Wuxia, Unspoken suddenly said sourly, "Hubby, you're dressed so low-key and there are so many girls surrounding you. You're so charming." Wuxia was a little confused at first and did not know what she was jealous about. It was only when he turned around and saw people crowding around him and secretly taking photos of him that he finally understood the source of her jealousy. He leaned closer to her and deliberately teased her, "Why, are you jealous?" Unspoken snorted, "No way." Yu and Xiao Yichen stood at the side and looked at each other meaningfully. They covered their mouths and snickered. "Daddy, Mommy is jealous." "Who told you to attract so many girls?" "That's right. Look, there are so many girls surrounding you and secretly taking pictures of you. TSK TSK TSK. Unspoken pursed her lips and was about to take a bite of the cotton candies. However, the man beside her suddenly bent down and took a bite of the cotton candies in her hand. The pink cotton candies quickly turned into sweet sugar stains on his lips and looked especially alluring. "You have your own. Why do you want to eat mine? My wife's is delicious." He licked his lips gently and took the opportunity to hold her hand. He pushed the pram with his other hand and slowly walked forward. This action unconsciously made it clear to everyone that he was already taken. In this way, some people should not be jealous. Chapter 3207. How can this be fake? Look at him pushing the stroller and holding that woman's hand. It looks like he's married and has a child. No way. Sigh, all good men are taken. I don't think so. Who said that a man pushing a stroller must be a father? Maybe it's someone else's child. When Yu heard this, he suddenly curled his lips into a sinister smile. He lowered his head and glanced at the stroller. Little Yueyao was looking at the hydrogen balloons tied to the stroller with her eyes wide open. She actually became excited and waved her hands around, reaching out to grab the balloons as if she wanted to play with them. He fiddled with the hydrogen balloons, causing them to sway slightly. Little Yueyao stared at the hydrogen balloons motionlessly, watching them float around. She became even more excited and kicked her little legs, revealing her soft gums. "Yaya." The tender voice attracted Wuxia's attention. He stopped in his tracks and walked to the front of the stroller. He didn't know when little Yueyao had woken up, but she was smiling so widely that her eyes looked like two crescent moons. His heart softened a little, and he reached out to hug Yueyao. "Come, let Daddy hug you." With this hug, the people around them sighed again and again. He had to call himself Daddy. This young and handsome man must be married and have a child. Yu heard the disappointed discussions around him and sneered in his heart. What are you looking at? His daddy was already taken, so what chance did they have to covet him? The little one was in his arms, but she didn't look at him. Instead, she turned her head and straightened her neck, staring at the hydrogen balloons. She was so excited that she reached out to grab them, but she couldn't. She was so anxious that she kept kicking her legs. Little Yueyao turned her head and patted Wuxia's cheeks eagerly. She seemed to be asking him to let her play with the helium balloon. When Yunshishi saw this, she immediately untied a rope and held the hydrogen balloon in front of her. Little Yueyao's small hands grasped the rope tightly, but with great strength. Her grip strength was definitely extraordinary among babies of the same age. Yueyao felt that it wasn't enough to just hold on to it, so she tugged harder. The hydrogen balloon swayed in mid-air and moved up and down as she tugged. Suddenly, the little Yueyao's hand loosened, and the hydrogen balloon broke free of its clamp and slowly floated up into the blue sky. Ah! Little Yueyao's eyes widened in surprise as she watched the hydrogen balloon fly higher and higher. It was as if there were countless little stars twinkling in her eyes. It was exceptionally beautiful. Yunshishi followed her gaze and looked at the balloons that were rising higher and higher. There was a small heart in the round, transparent balloon. Under the blue sky and white clouds, the scene was dreamy. Yu Yu and Shao Yichen also looked at the balloons that were constantly rising. Little Yueyao's crisp laughter echoed in their ears. Ha ha ha, the people around them also stopped and looked up into the sky. Someone exclaimed, Aya! Whose balloons are flying? Oh my god! These balloons cost 100 yuan each. Why do I feel like there's a red 100 yuan bill flying up into the sky? How high can these balloons fly? Shao Yichen suddenly felt extremely happy. Her heart was filled with happiness, and she was extremely satisfied. Chapter 3208. He was happy because it was in Fairy Tale Valley that he met Yu Yu and his mommy for the first time. However, he was worried because he did not have enough fun in Fairy Tale Valley. Firstly, the last time he came here with his daddy, Song Enya and Song Enshi had tagged along. This was especially so for Song Enshi, who kept sticking to his daddy. She either wanted him to accompany her on the merry-go-round or to hug her. His daddy doted on her, so he kept hugging her. He found the scene of his daddy hugging Song Enshi to be an eyesore no matter how he looked at it. At that time, he could only follow behind them alone. He watched his daddy carry Song Enshi while Song Enya stood beside him. The three of them laughed and chatted happily, looking like a real family of three. He, on the other hand, was the only one left out and felt extremely uncomfortable. He still remembered that Song Enshi kept clamoring to ride the merry-go-round at that time. He did not like it. It was not that he was not interested in the merry-go-round, but that he had a stubborn child. No matter how much he liked something that someone he hated liked, he could not bring himself to like it. Therefore, when he saw his daddy carrying Song Enshi on the merry-go-round, his heart felt empty. Later on, Song Enshi deliberately teased him and slandered him for pushing her. In the end, his daddy escorted her to the hospital and left him alone in Fairy Tale Valley. He felt as if he had been abandoned by the world. But it was different now. His daddy was carrying his sister, and the people walking with him were his mommy, his younger brother, and their family of 5. Especially when he saw his daddy carrying Yueyao with a doting expression, he felt extremely blissful. Shao Yichen took a bite of the cotton candy and smiled happily. He suddenly tugged at Yu Yu's sleeve and said happily, Yu Yu, are there any fun activities in Fairy Tale Valley? Let's play together. When Yu Yu heard this, he looked a little lonely. He licked his lips and said helplessly, there are many activities that I can't play. I can only watch you play. Are there no activities suitable for you? No. Yu Yu pointed at her chest and said, some games are too exciting. I feel uncomfortable here and can't breathe. Moreover, he had respiratory syndrome. If he played a game that was too exciting, it would trigger. At that time, it would spoil everyone's mood, and the loss would outweigh the gain. It was rare for the family of 5 to gather together and come out to play. His younger sister was still around. He didn't want to spoil the fun just because of his health. Shao Yichen knew that because of his health, he couldn't enjoy many events to his heart's content. However, there should be events that suited him, right? Fairy Tale Valley couldn't be filled with exciting activities, could it? What about the merry-go-round? Mu Yichen pointed in the direction of the merry-go-round. This ride isn't exciting. You can ride it. The carousel is fine. The two little munchkins walked up to Unspoken and egged her on. Mommy, can you ride the merry-go-round with us? Unspoken had no choice but to ask Mu Yaja to look after little Yueyao. Thus, she held the two little guys' hands and walked towards the merry-go-round. With a VIP card in hand, there was no need to line up for any of the events. Mu Yaja sat on a long bench at the side and waited for them to come out after they finished playing. Not long after he sat down, little Yueyao looked a little anxious. He whined like a kitten, as if he wanted something. Chapter 3209. Mu Yaja was quite experienced. He knew that she was hungry and wanted to drink milk. There was milk in the milk bottle that Unspoken had prepared beforehand. He only needed to take it out, shake it evenly, open the lid, and bring the pacifier to her mouth. She took a bite and sucked on the pacifier. Hugging the milk bottle, she sucked on it with relish. She was probably very hungry. Ever since she woke up, she had only drunk a few mouthfuls of milk and had not eaten much. She had been sleeping soundly in Unspoken's arms. When they entered the garden, the little guy's attention was attracted by the hydrogen balloon. Now that there was no attraction, her hunger came. She hugged the milk bottle and drank quickly, but surprisingly, she did not choke. Slow down. Mu Yaja saw that her face was flushed red from drinking too quickly. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He could not help but say, "No one is fighting with you." He was afraid that she would suck on the pacifier until it broke. This little guy, really, she had sucked on 2 or 3 of the pacifiers at home. Such a battle record was something that no other baby girl of the same age could achieve. Only his little princess had the ability to do so. Many tourists passed by and saw this scene. They saw a handsome man sitting on a bench with a tender little princess in his arms. He hugged the milk bottle and drank with relish. They could not help but click their tongues in wonder. These days, bringing a baby who was not even a year old out to play, but most of the time, it was the mother who took care of the child. It was very rare to see a father taking care of a child. And such a young and gentle father. Hey, why don't I have such a young and handsome father? If I had such a father, I would wake up laughing in my dreams. Ha ha ha. If I had such a father, I probably wouldn't be able to find a boyfriend in this lifetime. Don't tell me you haven't daddy complex? No way. If my father is so handsome, why would he fancy those wild boys outside? These words fell into Mu Yaja's ears without missing a beat. The corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up. These words made his ears feel especially good. Yueyao, did you hear that? Your daddy is so handsome. In the future, if you find a man who isn't as handsome as daddy, don't bring him back. Little Yueyao held the milk bottle and tilted his head as if he didn't understand his words. He blinked his eyes and continued to suck on his beloved milk bottle. By the time Unspoken and the two little munchkins came out from the merry-go-round, little Yueyao had already eaten her fill and was sleeping soundly in Mu Yaja's arms. Unspoken walked over to his side. Seeing that the little Yueyao was sleeping soundly, she was shocked when she saw the empty milk bottle next to his hand. You fed her milk? Yes. Xiao Yichen was also so surprised that he picked up the milk bottle and couldn't close his mouth. Wow. He drank it all. Little sister's appetite is so big. Little sister has always been like a wolf drinking milk. If this goes on for a long time, will she gain weight? Unspoken was also worried. Will she eat until she's full? Why didn't you ask her to eat less? I wanted to. Mu Yaja said helplessly. When I tried to snatch her milk bottle, she glared at me angrily and refused to let go of the bottle. If I tried to snatch it from her, she would definitely choke. Chapter 3210. Burp. It sounded like a small bubble bursting. Yu and Xiao Yichen were amused. Oh my, how could little sister be so cute? They couldn't bear to part with her. Yu wanted to hug her, but the sun was getting brighter. Xianxia was worried that Yao would get sunburned, so she urged, "Put Yao in the stroller to sleep." Wuxia was reluctant to let her go, but the sun was indeed getting brighter. He reluctantly put the little guy in the stroller and pushed it towards the next attraction. "Mommy, do you still remember?" As they passed by Happiness Street, Yu looked at the game stall and said excitedly, "You won a toy for me here before." Xianxia saw this and thought of something. She giggled and said, "I remember. You said you wanted to play before, but you couldn't make many shots." Yu's face instantly turned red. He said indignantly, "That's because I wasn't in shape. Now that I'm playing shooting games, I'll definitely improve." With that, he pulled little Chen over to the hoop machine. After flashing his VIP card, he took the ball from the hoop and started throwing it indignantly. Xianxia and Wuxia walked over and stood outside the crowd to watch. Yu tried his best to shoot the ball. His face was red from holding back, but it wasn't that he didn't improve. However, in the past, he could only make one shot. Now, he could make two. Such a small improvement wasn't worth mentioning. After only half a minute, his stamina couldn't keep up. His accuracy dropped again. In the end, he only managed to score more than 500 points and won a commemorative prize. Yu left the basketball machine dejectedly. Xiao Chen walked up to him and said, "Yu, Big Brother will win a prize for you." He showed his VIP card as well. Soon, the time started. He grabbed the basketball, his eyes burning with a fierce fire. Whoosh, 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 he threw 10 consecutive shots and hit the target every time. Xiao Chen had great stamina. Furthermore, he was much better at sports than Yu. Therefore, he was naturally gifted at sports like basketball and soccer. He rarely played basketball, and he didn't shoot much either, but his accuracy was surprisingly high. By the time the game ended, he had obtained more than 1,000 points and could get a second prize. Second prize, this prize was already very generous. It was a rare toy from Liji, and Xiao Chen successfully won it. It was a cute and lifelike little tiger with snow-white fur and emerald-like eyes. It was extremely realistic. Xiao Chen thought it was just a simple plush toy. When he received the toy, he muttered, "So this is the second prize? It looks very ordinary." "Of course not." Yu scoffed and took the toy from his hand. Then, he gently pinched its left paw. With a beep, it entered recording mode. It turned out that this plush toy wasn't an ordinary tiger plush toy. It also had a recording function. Yu said to the tiger's little mouth, "Little Yao is the most beautiful princess in the world." Chapter 32:11. Wow! You can play like that? If you press the left paw, the previous recording will be replaced. Little Chen could not bear to let go of the cub as he smiled from ear to ear. "This is so fun. Did you design this as well?" "Sort of." "What do you mean sort of?" "Not all the toys were designed by me, but the designs were all approved by me." Yu said proudly, "Do you know why Liji beat those old toy companies and became the world's #1 toy company?" Xiao Chen was puzzled. "Why?" "That's because most of the toys designed by adults are perfunctory. Only those who are truly childlike can design toys that all the children in the world like." Yu continued, "Only the children can understand what kind of toys they want." When they passed by the shooting range, Yu suddenly recalled the first time they were at Fairy Tale Valley. Xiao Chen had hugged a giant panda and stood in line at the entrance of the haunted house. At that time, he was surprised that someone had won the first prize in a shooting game. Later, when he found out that Xiao Chen had won, he was even more surprised. Why was this guy so good at all kinds of games? "Xiao Chen, your shooting skills are so good. Go and win a special prize." Xiao Chen said, my shooting skills are not even half of Daddy's. Then, Xiao Yichen said to Mu Yaja coquettishly, Daddy, go and play that shooting game and win a special prize for you. Mu Yaja said, no. Why? It's such a childish game. Yu snorted and said mockingly, Daddy is afraid that he won't be able to play well and will lose face. That's why he didn't dare to accept the challenge. Shishir laughed in her heart. This method of provocation probably wouldn't work on a certain man. However, the outcome was unexpected. A certain man snorted coldly, stood up, and said, Are you looking down on your daddy's standards? Then Daddy can only use his strength to slap his face. Shishir was confused. I'll go. Who was the more childish one? Can't you hear such obvious provocation? Mu Yaja walked to the front of the adult design table, showed his VIP card, and said to the staff, Give me a gun. His appearance attracted the attention of countless people. This man was always so dazzling when he appeared in the crowd. So much so that when he appeared, the surrounding crowd suddenly quietened down. Their gazes fell on this tall and handsome man, sizing him up. Even the staff member couldn't help but become infatuated. After staring blankly for a long time, she blushed and handed the heavy gun to him. Mu Yaja raised his gun, and the countdown began. He aimed at the bullseye and pulled the trigger. The bullet immediately cut through the air and shot out. Although the speed was slow, his aim was accurate. He aimed at the most inflated part of the balloon. He knew very well which part of the balloon was the weakest. Therefore, every bullet that was shot out would be accompanied by the sound of an explosion. The balloon burst. Bang, bang, bang. A few rounds of bullets were fired. None of them missed. Gasps could be heard coming from the surrounding crowd. Chapter 32:12. While everyone was still in shock, Mu Yaja focused on raising the gun. He loaded the gun skillfully and pulled the trigger again. Bang! 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 Along with the sound of balloons bursting, the scoreboard fell to the ground one after another. The crowd was in a heated discussion. This man's marksmanship is amazing. It doesn't look like it's his first time using a gun. Could he be a shooter? Judging from his aura, he seems to be from a military academy. When the last bullet was used, there were still a few seconds left. Mu Yaja put down the gun. The staff member was still in a daze and did not react for a long time. It was only when the time was up that she snapped back to her senses. The man reminded her expressionlessly, It's time to calculate the points. Oh. The staff member collected the scoreboard and calculated the total points. There were more than 800 points. Xiao Yichen was also shocked. He walked over to take a look and saw that there were a few 50 points. Daddy's luck was so good. When he first started playing this game, he only had about 300 points. Daddy's points actually broke the record that he had kept until now. More than 800 points. This was really unprecedented. In the future, Daddy could only break the record on the shooting range for fun. Mu Yaja was not surprised by this result. In fact, it was a good result that he had expected. The staff member smiled and said, Sir, you have a total of more than 800 points. You can choose any of the prizes on the shooting range, including the special prizes in the area. At this moment, little Yueyao woke up. Shishir carried Yueyao in her arms. The little girl rubbed her sleepy eyes and blinked gently. When Xiao Yichen saw that his little sister had woken up, he said to Yu, Why don't you pick a toy that little sister likes? When everyone saw this, they could not help but gasp in amazement. This little girl is so cute. Look at her eyes. They're so beautiful. It's no wonder that this little girl is so beautiful. She doesn't even know what kind of genes her parents have. One is handsome and the other is beautiful and gentle. This girl is also a natural beauty. When she grows up, she will definitely be a super beauty. That's great. Now I want to have a daughter too. However, Yu and Xiao Yichen started discussing nervously. My little sister likes dolls. Why don't we get the first prize for the SD doll? But the grand prize is a 1-meter-long giraffe. Yu and Xiao Yichen ran to the prize area. They each picked up an SD doll and a giraffe and walked over to Yueyao for her to choose. Sister, what kind of toys do you like? Yun Shishir hugged Yueyao and asked gently, Yueyao, your two brothers are asking you what toys do you like. Everyone's gaze fell on little Yueyao. They were curious to see how this adorable little girl would react. Little Yueyao first looked at the SD doll that Yu was holding up high. Her big eyes lit up and she immediately reached out to grab it. She seemed to like it very much. Yeah, she could not speak yet, so she could only babble incoherently. However, from her expression, it seemed that she really liked this doll. Yun Shishir was curious when she saw this. Yueyao seems to like the SD doll more. When Yu saw that she liked it, he quickly pushed the SD doll into her arms. Chapter 32:13. When Xiao Yichen saw this, he reluctantly hugged the giraffe and squeezed in front of Yu again. He said to Yueyao, little sister, don't you like this doll? It's a giraffe. When you grow up, you can hug it to sleep. When the people around them saw this, their hearts were warmed by this loving scene. These two little brothers must be twins, right? They were so nice to their little sister. It was obvious that these two little guys doted on their little sister a lot. Some of the moms were envious and amused at the same time. Many families would fight over a toy when they had a second child. They were afraid that one of them would be favored and the other would be neglected and ostracized. Sometimes, bickering was unavoidable. Hence, a harmonious relationship between children was extremely rare and precious. When Yueyao saw the giraffe in Xiao Yichen's arms, she instinctively reached out to grab it. To her, there were so many interesting, fun, and novel things in this world. She would find anything that she had never seen before interesting. However, she was still so young and didn't know how to choose. She only knew that she wanted whatever was given to her. When Yu saw this, she immediately shouted, Mu Yichen, don't go back on your word. Little sister obviously likes the SD doll more. Says who? You're the one who's going back on your word. If you didn't want to put the SD doll in front of little sister so badly that she can't see the toy in my arms, she wouldn't want your doll. What do you know? All girls like dolls. Especially the SD doll. It's exquisite and realistic. Little sister will love it so much that she won't be able to put it down. The giraffe is still the cutest. Little sister will definitely like the present I choose. The two little guys, one holding the SD doll and the other hugging the giraffe, were arguing about whose present their little sister would like more. The surrounding people burst into good-natured laughter. Mu Yaja's lips twitched. He walked over and said, Why are you arguing again? Daddy, Yu is being shameless. You're the one who's being shameless. I don't care. Anyway, little sister wants an SD doll first. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She asked Yueyao, which brother picked your favorite toy? Yueyao looked at the SD doll in Yu's hands and then looked at the giraffe in Xiao Yichen's arms. For a moment, he was in a dilemma. She then looked at the two little lads who were looking at her with eager eyes. She was so nervous that she held her breath. It was as if this wasn't a toy selection, but a sacred election. In his heart, he was shouting, Sister, choose me, choose me. Yueyao suddenly stretched out both of his hands. One of his hands reached for the doll in Yu's arms, while the other hand reached for the giraffe in Xiao Yichen's arms. Yun Shishir explained, It's broken. Your little sister is greedy. She wants both. Mu Yaja held his forehead and said, Stop arguing. Since Yueyao likes both, then she wants both. He went back to the shooting range and said to the staff, "I'll play again." Again? Chapter 32:14. Mu Yaja looked to the side and saw two staff members holding balloons, perspiring profusely. They were blowing them with their cheeks puffed up. They looked at him pleadingly. The staff member immediately tried to smooth things over. "Sir, your shooting skills are obvious to all. Why don't we give you both toys? After all, you've earned more than 800 points." When they left Fairy Tale Valley, Mu Yaja pushed a pram with a gigantic giraffe plushie on top of it. Her adorable expression attracted the attention of countless people. Little Yueyao lay in the pram, hugging the SD plushie in her arms. Occasionally, she would grab her hair and occasionally play with her limbs. She was overjoyed. Xiao Yichen and Yu were like two guardian deities guarding the pram as they walked towards the parking lot. Unspoken walked at the back. Looking at this scene, she felt as though her heart was filled with something. Sometimes, happiness was just a momentary perception. In a certain frame, her heart was filled with happiness. At this moment, she suddenly felt that everything in her life, everything she had now, there was nothing else she could ask for. In the past, when she was still a young girl, her biggest wish was to meet a man she truly loved and walk into the sacred hall of marriage with him. However, at this moment, she suddenly felt that a grand wedding wasn't that important anymore. Dullness was true. These words were not false. Although life after marriage was peaceful, every day when she hugged him to sleep, she could see his sleeping face when she woke up. She had two adorable sons and an adorable daughter. In this life, God treated her well. Everything that she had was not easy to come by, so she knew to cherish it even more. Mu Yaja pushed the pram and suddenly realized that there was an empty space beside him. He stopped in his tracks and turned around. He saw Unspoken walking slowly behind him. He smiled and extended his hand to her. "Shursher, hold my hand." Unspoken was stunned. Looking at his outstretched hand, she smiled sweetly and extended her hand to him. He held it fast at once. She caught up to him and heard him say, "There are so many people. Don't get lost." She took his arm and smiled at him. Yes. When the family of 5 returned home, they were met with Zhang Wansan's family, who was waiting at the door. They went to Fairy Tale Valley to play, and the Zhang family really waited at their door for an entire day. Seeing that Mu Yaja had returned, Zhang Wansan immediately came up to him and personally apologized to him. He didn't want him to lose his job because of such a small matter. On the other hand, the woman at the side secretly shed tears. She seemed to realize the seriousness of the matter and knew that she had offended a big shot. It was too late for regrets. Holding her son's hand, the woman and the child bowed and apologized repeatedly. "Chairman Mu, we know we were wrong. We have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive us." The little guy was really frightened. He kept bowing and apologizing. His childish voice was trembling. The arrogance and domineering attitude he had when he bullied Yu was gone. Instead, he was crying helplessly and rubbing his tears. He was extremely sad. It was probably because Zhang Wansan had taught him a lesson yesterday that he knew he was in the wrong. Mu Yaja was hard-hearted and naturally ignored him. Xiao Yichen and Yu also wanted to enter the house without looking back. Chapter 32:15. The little boy was stunned. He raised his head and looked at the gentle woman in front of him in astonishment. When the child's mother saw this, she had mixed feelings. "Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Mu. Mommy, why are you paying attention to them?" Yu said unhappily. "Don't bother about them." Unspoken said to them, "You can go back." But, Zhang Wansan still looked at Mu Yaja hesitantly, as if he wanted to say something. Unspoken seemed to know what was on his mind. She said calmly, "There's a saying that goes, a close neighbor is better than a distant relative. This matter is over. I just hope that you will discipline your son well in the future. Children can't be spoiled. They'll be spoiled. Yes. Yes. I'll definitely discipline my son well. In the future, I won't let him be so unreasonable and bully other children. Zhang Wansan left with his wife and son. Yu looked at their backs as they left. He said unhappily, "Mommy, why are you so gentle to them?" Yun Shishir suddenly squatted down in front of him and said calmly, Yu, do you know? Leaving some leeway for others is also leaving some leeway for yourself. Yu seemed to understand. Ever since the incident with Yun Na, Gu Xing's death, and when she regained her sight and could see the world clearly, Yun Shishir's state of mind had changed greatly. She started to believe in karma. She believed that a good cause would lead to a good outcome. She believed that one should be forgiving whenever possible. Sometimes, there's no need to force people into a dead end. It's not like there's a deep hatred. Sometimes, if you force someone into a dead end, who knows what kind of revenge that person will take out of hatred and their despair? Yu, do you know? Mommy believes in karma now. I only think about how to conduct myself in the world and how to be peaceful. I also hope that what Mommy does can accumulate some karma for all of you. Mommy, don't be afraid. Daddy and Yu will protect you. However, Yun Shishir said, compared to being protected by Yu, Mommy really wants to protect you and not let anyone hurt you. When a person is in despair, they will develop great hatred because of a single mistake. In the midst of hatred, people would often lose their rationality. In other words, if Zhang Wansan really lost his job because of this matter and fell to the bottom of the valley, who knew how ruthless they would be and how they would deal with them? She didn't want anyone to ruin this peaceful happiness. However, according to Mu Yaja's character, even if he didn't make Zhang Wansan lose his job, it was inevitable that he would be demoted a few levels. However, Zhang Wansan was already extremely grateful for this kind of treatment. From then on, the Zhang family became much more well-behaved. Sometimes, when they bumped into each other on the road, they would nod politely and greet each other. Of course, this was all in the future. The date of the wedding has been set. When Gong Jie received the notice and learned that the wedding would be held in a month's time, he was filled with mixed feelings. He made a trip to Hurricane's headquarters but did not return to the Gong family immediately. Instead, he went to take a look at Yun Yecheng, wanting to tell him the good news as soon as possible. Yun Yecheng had been transferred to a ward. His body had yet to fully recover and was still waiting for surgery. However, he had already undergone a few skin grafts, and his face had basically recovered. It was just that it was difficult for such a recovery to be exactly the same as before the disfigurement. Chapter 32:16. Gene regeneration was a huge project. Alice told Gong Jie that it would take more than 30 surgeries to reconstruct his basic functions if he were to fully recover. Of course, the recovery she was referring to was only in a certain sense. For example, the recovery of vocal cords and the functions of other organs. When Gong Jie entered the ward, Yun Yecheng was lying on the bed with an oxygen tube inserted. His eyes were open and he seemed to be awake. The electrocardiogram showed that everything was normal. He walked to the bed, bent down, and called out to Yun Yecheng, "Uncle?" Yun Yecheng turned his head slightly and glanced at him. With much difficulty, he said in a hoarse voice, "Shao Jie, you're back, Gong Jie sat down by the bed and took out his phone. He found the wedding post and a few wedding photos that Yun Shishir had taken for him. He passed them to him and flipped through them for him to see. At the same time, he said softly to him, "Shishir is getting married soon. Before that, work hard to recuperate. I'll bring you to the wedding venue." Upon hearing this, Yun Yecheng's lifeless eyes opened wide at once. His gaze brightened a little. Shishir is finally getting married. When little Yueyao was born, he was still in a coma after the surgery because of his condition. He could not rush over personally. When he woke up again, he found out from Gong Jie that Yun Shishir had given birth to another daughter. He felt rather gratified that they had made a good son. However, at the same time, he could not help but feel regretful. He could not be by his side when his beloved daughter was giving birth. He even had to see his granddaughter through photos. In the photos, there was a family of 5. Wuxia sat by the bed and hugged Xianxia in his arms. Xianxia was holding little Yueyao and facing the camera. Xiao Yichen and Yu were smiling at the camera and making victory gestures. It was warm and beautiful. When he saw it, he felt incomparably gratified. However, when he heard Gong Jie say that he would be bringing him to the wedding venue, he was suddenly put in a spot. If Xianxia is getting married, I won't go. When Gong Jie heard this, he was extremely surprised. Why? Xiao Jie, look at me, there are so many VIPs at the wedding. I'm afraid my appearance will scare them off. Uncle, how can you think like that? Gong Jie comforted him, if you don't go, Xianxia will be sad again. She would definitely want you to be a witness for such an important occasion. Hearing this, Yunyicheng felt touched and sad at the same time. He blinked and tears welled up in his eyes. He still felt that he had let her down. Because of Yun Na, he had always been brooding over it. Gong Jie comforted him again. He said, "You're Xiaxia's father. You're her most important relative." When Yunyicheng heard this, tears welled up in his eyes again. Only then did he nod and agree to go. However, when Gong Jie left the ward, he recalled what he had just said and was momentarily stunned. You're Xiaxia's father. You're her most important relative. Then, what about her father? Gong Jie returned to the Gong residence absent-mindedly. Just as he walked upstairs, the butler saw him and immediately stopped him. Young master, old master is waiting for you in the study. Father is looking for me? Chapter 32:17. Gong Jie hesitated for a moment before he turned and went to the study. In the study, Gong Xiaoying was sitting at the table with a photo in his hand. His gaze fell on the photo, and it was dark and inexplicable. When he heard a knock on the door, he looked up and casually placed the photo into a stack of documents. Come in. Gong Jie pushed the door open and walked in. He looked at him and said respectfully, Father, you were looking for me? When Gong Xiaoying saw that it was him, he slowly stood up and walked in front of him, sizing him up. Kid, you seem to have disappeared from the face of the earth some time ago. I don't know where you went to fool around again. When Gong Jie heard this, he felt extremely guilty, but he pretended to be calm and explained, I went to Africa some time ago to follow a batch of orders. Africa? Gong Xiaoying smirked coldly and said in a low voice, I've checked your whereabouts. You've been in Z country some time ago. Gong Jie was speechless. He secretly suspected that his father had sent someone to follow him or had deliberately investigated his whereabouts. However, Gong Xiaoying said, Why? Are you hiding something from me? Gong Jie said, No. No? Gong Xiaoying probed, You've been going to Z country. Don't tell me that you've kept a little pet there and can't bear to come back. Gong Jie knew that the little pet Gong Xiaoying was referring to was a woman. He said, Father, you didn't send someone to follow me, did you? No, I didn't. I just saw that you were always distracted, so I was just asking. However, Gong Xiaoying did not expose him. The father and son looked at each other for a long time. In their eyes, they were sizing each other up and probing each other. Gong Xiaoying had summoned him to get some information from him. However, this kid had sealed his mouth tightly and did not say a word. He knew that he would not be able to get any information from him. Hence, he said, Go back. I have nothing else to ask you. Gong Jie wondered if his father had sent someone to investigate his whereabouts, or if his father had followed his trail and found out about Xianxia. However, it wasn't appropriate for him to directly ask about these doubts. If it wasn't true, it would be like him confessing without being pressed. Or perhaps, his father was just testing him. He didn't know about Yun Shishir at all. Thinking of this, he had mixed feelings, but he didn't say anything and left the room. Gong Xiaoying saw the door close and returned to the desk with a complicated expression. He took out the photo from the pile of documents. This was a photo taken by Yun Shishir for a fashion magazine. He sent someone to investigate Yun Shishir's whereabouts. Among the information brought back by his subordinates, there were a series of photos and posters of her. He only kept this one because it had Mu Qingqing's shadow in it. Based on this photo alone, he was certain that the woman in the photo was his daughter. He had always thought that his daughter was no longer in this world. Mu Qingqing had given birth to a pair of twins for him. However, he had always thought that this daughter had unfortunately died. He didn't expect that she was still alive. Yun Shishir, that was his daughter's name. Chapter 32:18. On the eve of the wedding, there was a lot of preparation work. Mu Yaja started preparing a month in advance to avoid being flustered due to the lack of time. The wedding invitations had been sent out one after another. This time, the invitations were personally designed by Yun Shishir. After her confinement, she did not make a comeback immediately. When she was at home, she would read some reference books and think about the setting and invitations for the wedding. In order to be able to participate as much as she could, she learned some graphic design. The design of the invitation was very special. With a red background, a gold inlaid border, and a hollowed-out rose, it was a combination of Chinese and Western, adding to the festive atmosphere. After the invitations were sent out, they had to start preparing the details of the wedding. For example, the bridesmaids and groomsmen. Yu suggested forming a group of sisters, but Yun Shishir did not have many close friends. Those who had been married before could not be the bridesmaids. Hence, the bridesmaids were decided to be Xiao Shui, Mu Shi, and Jun Mo. When Jun Mo heard that Yun Shishir wanted to invite her to be the bridesmaid of the wedding, she was surprised and happy. She joked that she played the second male lead, Su Qi, in the movie The Green Apple. Now, she was finally going to personally send her lover into the wedding hall. However, she was a little worried that she would not be able to pull off a dress. Jun Mo had always been dressed in a more neutral outfit. In addition, Yun Shishir's wedding was a Chinese wedding. Hence, she was quite worried. However, the wedding planner said that if short-haired people would look out of place in traditional Chinese clothing, they could provide wigs. When Yun Shishir heard this, she immediately dragged the 3 bridesmaids to try on the makeup. After trying it on, she realized that Jun Mo looked very good in women's clothes. After all, her facial features were there. A good-looking person would look good in anything. Jun Mo felt a little awkward at first, but Yun Shishir repeatedly emphasized that this was the only wedding and they had to give face. Jun Mo could only bite the bullet and agree. There was no need to worry about the groomsmen. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen were the best candidates. Mu Yaja also invited Qin Zhou to be the groomsman. Such a joyous occasion, Qin Zhou was naturally happy. The bridesmaids and groomsmen were finally decided. When they came back in the evening, Yun Shishir showed Mu Yaja the photos of the bridesmaids trying on their makeup. Mu Yaja especially noticed Jun Mo's appearance. He recognized Jun Mo as the second male lead in the movie at a glance and felt that it was a little unbelievable. Who is she? Wasn't he playing the second male lead? Yun Shishir said reproachfully, have you forgotten? I've introduced her to you before. Her name is Jun Mo. She's a real girl. She was a musician and liked to dress in a neutral manner. Her fans had always called her Adonis or Adonis. She had suffered a little because of my wedding. It was said that this was the first time she had worn a dress since she was young. You've made me feel flattered. Mu Yaja held back his laughter and nodded. It's very beautiful. He asked again, have the invitations been sent out? Actually, the VIP list for the wedding had been prepared long ago. Many of the invitations had been written long ago. However, there was an invitation that would never reach that person's hands. Chapter 32:19. This invitation card probably wouldn't be sent to him. However, she did not know why she had written his name on the invitation. When she came back to her senses, she realized that this invitation would not be sent to the other side of the world. She did not know if there would really be a heaven in this world like the legend said. She had seen a movie called The Postman of Heaven. The plot was about the male lead who was once an elite in the IT industry. He had a successful career and a flamboyant personality. However, due to an accident, he became a vegetable. God gave him 2 more weeks of life as a condition for him to be the postman of heaven. He would deliver letters between heaven and the human world, bringing hope to those who had lost their loved ones. She did not know if this invitation could be sent to heaven. If Gu Xingzhe was really in heaven, would he wish her happiness too? Thinking of this name, the rims of her eyes turned slightly sour again. In the past, she did not dare to hope too much for happiness, because once she became happy, she felt uneasy at the thought that this happiness was built on Gu Xingzhe sacrificing his life to protect her. It was too selfish of her. However, Qin Zhou said that Gu Xingzhe risked his life to protect her only because he hoped that she could be the continuation of his life. She could replace him and enjoy the joys and sorrows of life. She gradually got rid of the trauma. "Xingzhe, are you okay?" Unspoken smiled and mumbled as she slowly closed the invitation. Mu Yaja pushed open the door of the study and walked in. He saw her sitting alone at the table, pressing an invitation to her chest. She looked a little lonely. He walked over and gently put his arm around her shoulders. Looking at the invitation in her hand, he knew whose name was written on this invitation. He asked, "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking if this invitation can be sent to him." Mu Yaja could not help but laugh and burst her fantasy. Heaven does not exist in this world. When people die, they will not come back to life, and they will not become angels. The disappointment on Unspoken's face became more obvious. She also knew that her extravagant hope did not exist. It was just her wishful thinking. He slowly squatted down in front of her, held her hand, and said solemnly, "That's why, in my limited life, I'll cherish you." He reached out his hand and pinched her cheek gently. "My dear wife, you're about to get married. Don't think about those unpleasant memories anymore. People will inevitably have regrets in their lives, but these regrets cannot be brushed aside for the rest of their lives." "Yes." Unspoken put the invitation card back into the drawer and hugged him gently. The preparations for the wedding proceeded in an orderly manner. There was still a week before the wedding, so Gong Jia brought Yun Yecheng back to the country in advance. When Yun Yecheng got off the plane, he saw Unspoken carrying the pink Yueyao at the arrival gate. Mu Yaja, Yu Yu, and Xiao Yichen were all there. The corners of Yun Yecheng's lips twitched. He could not hold back his tears and they welled up. The father and daughter reunited again and were filled with emotions. Yun Yecheng felt extremely guilty and regretful toward her. During the darkest period of her life, he was not by her side to protect her. She was pregnant for 10 months, gave birth, and went through her confinement period after giving birth. He regretted that he was not by her side. Chapter 32:20. There was an indescribable sense of guilt in his heart. Unspoken, on the other hand, was very surprised by Yun Yecheng's recovery. Ever since he was sent to the Gong family, they had been in contact through video calls. From the video, she could tell that Yun Yecheng was recovering very quickly, but she did not expect him to recover 50% of his looks. At least, after skin grafting, some of his functional organs were no longer a problem. Although his looks could not be said to have recovered completely, after some adjustments, it had already exceeded her expectations. What was even more surprising was that he could already speak fluently. After a few vocal cord surgeries, he could already express himself clearly in words. Unspoken was pleasantly surprised. She hugged Gong Jia and was so excited that she could not speak. Gong Jie smiled. Sister, I promised you that I'll do my best. Since I've said that, I naturally have to fulfill my promise. Unspoken said sincerely to him, thank you. Shao Jie. Don't you think it's too polite to say thank you? Gong Jie had returned to the country to prepare for her wedding. Originally, Wuxia had invited the media to cover the entire wedding, but Unspoken requested not to be too ostentatious. However, because it involved the guests attending the wedding, most of them were of noble status, especially someone like Shao Jie, who could not be exposed in front of the cameras. Furthermore, there were many national politicians and leaders, as well as nobles from various countries. If the media were to expose it, it would be too much of a fuss. She wanted to keep a low profile. Yu said from the side, you're already destined to not be able to keep a low profile after marrying a perfect man like Daddy. At the side, Lu Jinyu and Jianghu were amused. Yu's words are amazing. Wuxia was elated when he heard that. As a father, he could not help but feel smug when his son praised him so much. Unspoken said in annoyance, Yu, Mommy is being serious. Mommy will be nervous if there are more than 10 media outlets following this wedding. Mommy, you've seen a lot of the world, after all. You've also been to Fashion Week. When you were filming, there were so many cameras pointed at you, but you didn't seem nervous at all. This is different. How is it different? Unspoken reiterated again, marriage and acting are different. If there were any mistakes during filming, they could still redo it. But when it came to marriage, they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to redo it. I only have one chance in my life, so I'm very nervous. Gong Jie said, speaking of which, I'm curious why I'm not the best man. Yu said, because Daddy is afraid that Uncle will cause trouble if he doesn't like it. Yu added, the best man's job is the most difficult. Uncle, I'm sure you won't be able to take it. Shao Yichen chimed in, that's right. The best man is the groom's slave. Uncle, are you willing to do that? Little Yichen replied, it's a small matter to ruin the wedding. What if Uncle regrets it halfway and can't bear to let Mommy marry Daddy? If that happens, Daddy won't be able to chase after them. The two little fellows echoed each other. Unspoken snorted and snickered. Gong Jie's face turned pale. If I couldn't bear to part with him, would I have specially rushed back to the country? For Yueao's sake, I wouldn't ruin the wedding. He was not that pretentious. He had already silently accepted the fact that Wuxia was his brother-in-law. Chapter 32-21. Lu Jinyu and Jianghu, who were sitting at the side, felt that they had been implicated. They jumped up and protested, what do you mean by the best man can't be too handsome? Exactly. Then what are we? Sister-in-law, we don't like what you're saying. Aren't we handsome? Gong Jie was satisfied. However, Wuxia was displeased. Madam, are you saying that I'm not as handsome as brother-in-law? Gong Jie chimed in, is there a need to ask? Sister is just worried that I'll steal your limelight if I'm the best man. Shut up. The truth is hurtful. Brother-in-law, this means that in sister's eyes, I'm more handsome than you. Shut up. I won't. Wuxia glared at him. Gong Jie glared back at him. Their eyes met, and there was a burst of electromagnetic sparks. Unspoken said, she seemed to have unintentionally started a war. Yu saw that her father and uncle were at loggerheads. She quickly tried to smooth things over and changed the topic. Uncle, how much have you prepared for Mommy's wedding? Gong Jie said, 50 million. Unspoken widened her eyes in shock. 50 million? Yeah. Gong Jie wrapped his arm around her arm and rested his chin on her shoulder. He smiled and said, Sister, are you touched? Wuxia reached out and pushed his face away. He sneered, 50 million? How petty. Petty? Gong Jie was furious. $50 million is petty? Do you want me to give you all my assets? Mu Yaja reached out shamelessly. Give it to me. Gong Jie sneered, brother-in-law, you're so shameless. Mu Yaja returned an elegant smile. No matter how shameless I am, I'm not as shameless as you. You keep saying that sister is the most important, but you only prepared a dowry of 50 million. How petty. Gong Jie gritted his teeth and said, fine, I'll give you 100 million then. 100 million? Yun Shishir sucked in another breath of cold air. She hurriedly used her fingers to calculate how much $100 million was worth. Yu watched from the side. She finally knew who Xiao Yichen had inherited his poor arithmetic skills from. $100 million is equivalent to about 700 million yuan. $100 million is equivalent to 700 million yuan. It was the sound of a golden abacus. Yun Shishir felt a headache coming on as she was being hit by the money. That much? How much was little Jie's net worth? How could he casually fork out 100 million? Yun Shishir doubted the credibility of this statement. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a triumphant smile. That's more like it. Keep your word, I'll be waiting for your check. Gong Jie felt that he had been tricked. His face was ashen, but he couldn't say anything to refute. Yun Shishir comforted him, it's okay, Xiao Jie. When you get married, get your brother-in-law to give you 200 million. Gong Jie's eyes lit up. Really? Yun Shishir nodded solemnly. Yu held her face and screamed, Daddy, the backyard is on fire. Mommy is going to sell you. Xiao Yichen collapsed on the sofa laughing. He hugged Mu Yaja's stiff back and laughed until he couldn't catch his breath. Daddy, hurry up and earn money. Otherwise, when uncle gets married, you won't be able to give him anything. Mu Yaja said, I refuse. 200 million? No. Yu also collapsed from laughing. Although Daddy could afford 200 million, if he took out 200 million at once, his little treasury would be empty. Among everyone present, Gong Jie had the highest net worth. Chapter 32-22. Yu was well aware of Gong Jie's wealth. His wealth was comparable to that of a country's. The annual revenue from orders in North America alone was more than a few billion $. After deducting the costs, the net profit was more than $3 billion. This was only the revenue from orders in North America. Apart from that, the total volume of arms sales in Africa was even more impressive. Most importantly, Gong Jie owned 2 military factories. The arms produced by these factories were sold to various countries and were very profitable. Yu had once described Gong Jie as his uncle. He was so rich that his hand would be greasy when he touched it. Hence, $100 million was nothing to him. However, this amount was still relatively objective for his daddy. Yu's heart ached for his daddy for a few seconds. Hua Jin had rushed over from the filming set. When he opened the door and saw Gong Jie, his back stiffened instantly. Oh my God, the crown prince was here again. It was the Devil King. Hua Jin deliberately walked around Gong Jie and sat next to Xiao Yichen. Gong Jie noticed that Hua Jin seemed to be avoiding him and frowned slightly. Why are you avoiding me? Do you think I will eat you? You will, however. Hua Jin only dared to keep these words to himself. He did not dare to say it out loud. Gong Jie was his nemesis. In his heart, Gong Jie had always been on the level of a demon king. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm going to hug my little niece. As he said this, Gong Jie stood up and walked towards the baby's room. He had been so focused on discussing the wedding that he had not seen the little Yueyao that he had been thinking about day and night. When he walked into the baby's room, little Yueyao was sleeping soundly in the cradle. Gong Jie did not want to disturb her, so he sat quietly by the side and rested his chin on one hand. He leaned against the side of the bed and looked at her quietly. After watching for a long time, the little Yueyao yawned and woke up in a daze. Interestingly enough, when he saw her yawn, he unconsciously followed suit and yawned as well. It was said that if one party yawned, the other party would also be affected. Little Yueyao opened his eyes and looked around. When he saw Gong Jia, he raised his eyebrows slightly and raised his little hand to point at him. In Gong Jia's eyes, it looked like he was greeting him. This squishy little ball obviously recognized Gong Jia. She kicked her little legs excitedly, opened her little hands, and scratched at him. He was obviously asking for a hug. His niece was asking for a hug. As her uncle, he was naturally happy to oblige. Gong Jia reached out and held little Yueyao in his arms under the little girl's armpit. But the next scene made him not know whether to laugh or cry. Perhaps it was because she had slept for too long, but the little girl was a little hungry. She pulled Gong Jia's clothes with familiarity, opened her little mouth, and accurately sucked on Gong Jia's chest through his clothes. Gong Jia's back stiffened. He lowered his head and looked at the little Yueyao's greedy face. Her little mouth left a circle of water on his clothes. He was speechless. Where did he get the milk from? This scene was coincidentally seen by Yu, who pushed the door open and walked in. At first, she was stunned for a moment, then she laughed until she was convulsing with laughter. Ha ha ha. Yu's laughter attracted a group of people over. Chapter 32-23. Gong Jia's face was gloomy. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and looked helpless. When he saw Mu Yaja enter, he became even more embarrassed and asked Yun Shishir for help. Sister, ha ha ha. Yun Shishir was also laughing so hard that she doubled over. Gong Jia said angrily, Sister, you're still laughing at me. Hurry up and feed her. Yun Shishir laughed and said, Just you wait. She turned around to get the milk bottle. Then she walked over and handed it to Gong Jia. Gong Jia looked at the milk bottle and was stunned for a moment. After Yun Shishir explained, he realized that Yueyao had used too much force when she was drinking milk and it always hurt her. Hence, she used a breast pump to suck all the milk into the milk bottle and then used the milk bottle to feed Yueyao. She must have been drinking the milk bottle for a long time. Gong Jia shook the milk bottle gently and then brought the pacifier to Yueyao's mouth. The little girl opened her small pink mouth and sucked on the pacifier. Then she drank the milk with relish. Yun Shishir couldn't help sneaking glances at the water stains on his chest from the corner of her eye. She couldn't help but laugh secretly from time to time. After Yueyao's 100th day celebration, Gong Jia went abroad. Even though he hadn't held Yueyao for a long time, he was still very familiar with the way he held her. When Yu saw this, he secretly whispered in Xiao Chen's ear, Uncle's way of holding Yueyao is so professional. He's much more qualified than Daddy. Mu Yaja heard him. He grabbed him by the ear and said darkly, What are you saying about me again? I'm just saying that Uncle's way of holding Yueyao is so professional. He'll definitely be a qualified stay-at-home dad in the future. Am I not? Of course Daddy is. Otherwise, how could he have raised Yueyao so well? Mu Yaja was finally satisfied. Gong Jia watched Yueyao suckle and asked, Can she talk now? Not yet. Little sister has just learned how to sit. That day, when they went out to play, little Yueyao suddenly sat up in order to snatch the toy from Yu's hands. This gave Yu a fright. After returning home, Yu told Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir that his little sister could sit up on her own. However, no matter how hard Yun Shishir tried to teach little Yueyao to sit up, the little girl remained indifferent. Until one day, she accidentally walked into the room and saw little Yueyao sitting up alone, playing with a toy. She got a shock. That was when she realized that perhaps little Yueyao had already learned how to sit up. However, this little girl was very lazy. Unless she was attracted by something, she would rather lie down than sit up. Gong Jia did not believe her. He moved the milk bottle away and looked at Yueyao patiently. Yueyao, call me uncle. Yeah, uncle. Uncle. Yeah, Gong Jia had an "I've lost to you" expression on his face. Yun Shishir said, she can't talk yet. If you teach her like this, she'll only think that you're playing with her. When she can talk, I'll definitely make her call me uncle first. No way. Mu Yaja disagreed. Give up. The first person she would call would definitely be daddy or mommy. Uncle? Dream on. Gong Jia sneered. How easy is it to pronounce uncle? Daddy is so difficult. Little Yueyao will definitely not be able to learn it. However, a certain man was very confident. My daughter is so smart. No matter how difficult it is, she'll be able to learn it. Chapter 32-24. Brother-in-law, let's bet that the first person Yueyao calls is uncle. When Yu heard this, he protested unhappily. Why can't she call me brother? Gong Jia smacked the back of his head and said in disdain, go away. This is none of your business. Yu held the back of his head and glared at him fiercely. Suddenly, he thought of something and smiled slyly. He turned around and whispered something in Xiao Yichen's ear. The latter gave Yu a knowing look and smiled mysteriously at him. The two little lads smiled slyly. At night, Yu and Xiao Yichen tiptoed through the bedroom door and slipped into the master bedroom. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. Little Yichen tiptoed into the nursery in the master bedroom and walked to the side of the cradle. He poked his head over and saw that little Yueyao was awake. Her big eyes were wide open, and when she saw him, she was so excited that her eyes squinted and she smiled. Her little legs kicked in excitement. Xiao Yichen immediately put his finger up and gestured for her to keep quiet. However, little Yueyao did not understand what he was gesturing at. Instead, she was curious. She widened her eyes and tilted her head in confusion. He bent down and carefully picked up little Yueyao. Then he carried his little sister and slipped out of the room and into his own bedroom. Yu took out the milk bottle and let Xiao Yichen carry little Yueyao. He first fed his beloved little sister milk. When the little girl was full, Xiao Yichen carried little Yueyao in his arms. Yu looked at her and smiled gently. Yueyao, brother will teach you how to speak, okay? Little Yueyao smacked her lips. Her bright eyes sparkled under the moonlight. Yu grabbed her little hand and said word by word, brother. Brother, he deliberately spoke slowly and enunciated each word clearly. He was teaching her seriously. When Yueyao heard this, she was tickled by his slow speech and especially amused expression. She kicked her little legs excitedly and giggled. Ha ha ha, Yu was confused and repeated, Yueyao, call brother. Brother, ha ha ha, little Yueyao kicked her little legs excitedly again. Yu held his forehead. He felt inexplicably helpless. Xiao Yichen quickly comforted him and said, Yu, don't be anxious. My sister is only 6 months old. Teaching her to speak at this time is already ahead of schedule. Moreover, she doesn't know anything and needs to be taught patiently. Hearing this, he innocently replied, Sis doesn't seem to understand what I'm saying. You're so big, but you can't understand what others are saying. Take it slow. Xiao Yichen grinned and said, you have to teach her how to call you brother first. Uncle and daddy will be furious. Humph. That's right. When Yu thought of how Gong Jia would look when he heard Yueyao calling him brother, he perked up again. Brother, ha ha ha, brother. Brother, ha ha ha. In the end, Yu's throat was almost smoking from teaching. He didn't know how this little one could laugh so easily. She couldn't stop laughing. You love to laugh. Chapter 32-25. Yu pinched her tender cheeks, only to see Yueyao yawn. He hurriedly said, hurry up and send her back to sleep. Xiao Yichen nodded and secretly carried Yueyao back to her room. The next day, at night, Yu calculated the time. He already knew his little sister's schedule like the back of his hand. He knew what time she would wake up in the middle of the night and when she would want to drink milk. Hence, he secretly carried Yueyao back to his room and patiently taught her how to speak over and over again. When Yueyao was sleepy, Xiao Yichen would carry her back to the nursery. However, after 4 to 5 days, little Yueyao did not seem to have made any progress. When he taught her to call him Big Brother, she would sometimes get impatient and kick him with her little feet. Yu could not help but feel aggrieved. After all, his mommy said that he could already say mommy when he was 5 months old. The pronunciation of mommy and mommy were several times more difficult than gij. In the end, after so many days of teaching, there was still no progress. Yu could not help but feel a little disappointed. Even so, he did not give up. On the eve of the wedding, Wuxia withdrew a stack of brand new banknotes from the bank. These banknotes were to be used to prepare red packets for the children. Each red packet contained $888, $800 bills, 8 $10 bills, and 8 $1 bills. The amount was not large and was purely for luck. However, these red packets had to be packed by hand. Yu and Xiao Yichen volunteered to pack the red packets. When Unspoken saw that they had volunteered to share the burden, she went to the garden with peace of mind and cut some Chinese roses to be used as the bride's bouquet. On the day of the wedding, they would have an outdoor wedding and an indoor one. The outdoor wedding would be a Western-style lawn wedding, while the indoor wedding would be a traditional Chinese wedding. A Western-style wedding would have a relaxed and romantic atmosphere, while a Chinese wedding would be grand and solemn. This was also the final result of the discussion between Unspoken and Wuxia. There were both Western and Chinese elements, and they did not conflict with each other. A lawn wedding was for the young guests. It was relaxing and romantic, but as the main venue, the wedding was more solemn. After Yu and Xiao Yichen sealed the red packets, another red packet appeared. Yu said that he wanted to give the red packet to his little sister. As soon as they reached the baby's room, Yu leaned over the crib and stuffed the red packet into little Yueyao's hand. "Here, little sister. This is a red packet for you. Call me Big Brother." He was merely joking and teasing her. After all, he didn't really expect his sister to be able to call out his name. However, what happened next gave Yu a big surprise. Little Yueyao reached out her little hand and pinched the corner of the red packet tightly. Her other hand fiddled with the red packet curiously, not knowing what was inside. She held the red packet with one hand, opened and closed her little mouth, and said 2 words, "Ge, ge." Yu was really shocked. He nervously held his breath and listened carefully. Little Yueyao gave him face. She waved the red packet in her hand and said with saliva bubbling from her pink little mouth, "Big Brother, wow." Yu was so excited that he almost jumped 3 feet high. Chapter 32-26. Yu hurriedly picked up little Yueyao and ran into the living room. Unspoken was meticulously arranging the bouquet. Yu carried little Yueyao to Unspoken. She was so excited that she didn't know what to do. "Mommy. Mommy. Little sister can speak. And the first person she can call is Big Brother." When Xiao Yichen heard this, she leaned over in surprise. "Really? Really?" When Unspoken heard this, she didn't think much of it. She asked curiously, "Yueyao can't speak yet. Yu, did you hear wrongly?" How could she not know that this little guy wanted to hear Yueyao call him Big Brother even in his dreams? Yu hurriedly explained, "Mommy, little sister really said Big Brother. I really heard it loud and clear. How could I have heard wrongly? No one taught her to call him Big Brother. Why would she call him Big Brother for no reason?" Unspoken only knew that Gong Jia and Wuxia had been secretly teaching little Yueyao to call him Uncle and Daddy. These 2 clowns seemed to be racing against time, fighting to be the first person Yueyao would call out Uncle or Daddy. Especially Wuxia. In order to make Yueyao open her mouth, he had used all sorts of methods. He had even used Yueyao's favorite toy to seduce her, but he still couldn't get her to open her mouth. There was nothing he could do about it. How old was Yueyao? She was more than 5 months old and still couldn't speak coherently. She could only vaguely use a few syllables to indicate her emotions. She would have to wait for 6 or 7 months before she could speak. However, they couldn't rule out the possibility of her speaking earlier. Yu said, "Mommy, it's true. I've been teaching little sister to call him Big Brother for the past few days. Didn't Mommy say that I also learned to speak earlier? Maybe little sister is smarter than me?" As he spoke, as if afraid that Unspoken wouldn't believe him, he gently squeezed Yueyao's little hand and said patiently, "Little sister, Mommy doesn't believe you. Hurry up and tell Mommy, what did you say just now?" Little Yueyao acted as if he did not hear what Yu said. He was still focused on the red packet in his hand. Her little hand was holding the red packet, almost tearing it apart, but she was playing with it enthusiastically. Yu tried her best to attract her attention. She shook her little hand and said gently, "Little sister, didn't you call me very clearly just now? Why aren't you barking now? Come on, let Mommy hear it. She doesn't believe me. Big brother, little sister, quickly call him Big Brother." When little Yueyao heard this, she thought that he wanted to play with the red packet in her hand, so she immediately raised the red packet in her hand and generously handed it to him. Yu was instantly amused and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, he still emphasized, "Mommy, Yueyao really did call me Big Brother." "Really?" Unspoken's eyes turned into crescents. She smiled and said, "Okay, Mommy got it. Maybe it's just a coincidence that little sister called him that once. There's still plenty of time in the future, so there will be more opportunities." Xiao Yichen couldn't help but feel a little regretful that he didn't hear Yueyao call him Big Brother. However, according to what Mommy said, there was still plenty of time in the future. Moreover, he was very open-minded. Even if he wasn't the first to learn to call him Big Brother, it didn't affect his love for his little sister. Little Yueyao yawned lightly, as if she was a little sleepy. Chapter 32-27. Okay. Yu obediently carried Yueyao into the room. When she came out, she sat next to Unspoken and asked curiously, "Mommy, the wedding is the day after tomorrow. Are you nervous?" Unspoken was stunned when she heard this. She nodded slightly and said with a red face, "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. Of course I'm nervous." Even though she had already rehearsed the wedding ceremony, she felt increasingly nervous as the wedding date approached. She didn't know why she was nervous, but she just felt nervous. Yu covered her mouth and giggled. "Is Daddy nervous too?" "Daddy seems to be busy with the wedding recently," Xiao Yichen mumbled. "Sometimes, he can't even make it back for dinner. He's busy decorating the venue. I told him that there would be someone to decorate the venue, but he wouldn't listen. He said that it's his own wedding, so he has to do everything himself. I even went to the bridal chamber with Daddy yesterday. It's so beautifully decorated." The bridal chamber was at Unspoken. Therefore, when the bride was picked up, they had to bring her to Unspoken before going to Unspoken Resort for the wedding. The night before the wedding, Wuxia went to the bridal chamber according to wedding tradition. At night, Unspoken was so nervous that she couldn't sleep. She had to get up early the next morning to wash up and dress up, but she still couldn't sleep until midnight. She was worried that something would go wrong at the wedding the next day. She didn't know if Wuxia was asleep, so she sent a text message. "Would be, are you asleep?" Within a few seconds, Wuxia replied, "Not yet." "You're still awake?" Unspoken pursed her lips and dialed his number. Wuxia picked up the phone and asked her why she wasn't asleep. Unspoken said coquettishly, "I'm so nervous that I can't sleep." "Why would I be nervous? Aren't you nervous? Close your eyes and don't let your imagination run wild. You'll fall asleep soon." "But," Unspoken said hesitantly, I'm nervous about whether the wedding will go smoothly tomorrow." On the other end, the man laughed when he heard that. "If I can't even handle a wedding, how can I be worthy of being your man?" These words were very pleasing to her ears. Her man was so reliable and gave her a great sense of security. Her heart was filled with sweetness. Unspoken then said, "Then I'll go to bed early." "You should rest early too." "Yes." After hanging up the phone, Unspoken turned off the wall lamp and fell asleep peacefully. The next day, the alarm clock went off at 5 o'clock. Unspoken woke up with a start. She was still a little groggy at first, but Yu knocked on the door and said, "Mommy, the makeup artist is here." She immediately woke up, and her sleepiness disappeared. She immediately went to the bathroom to wash up, and then opened the door. Outside the door, two makeup artists in well-ironed uniforms were dragging suitcases in their hands. This suitcase was filled with the equipment needed for the makeup. When they saw Unspoken, the two makeup artists were surprised. "Oh. The bride's skin is so good. I put on a facial mask last night." The makeup artists looked at each other and smiled. Then they said to Unspoken, "Shall we start the makeup?" Unspoken sat at the dressing table. Starting from her face, the two makeup artists started working separately. One put on her makeup, the other arranged her jewelry and ironed her clothes. Chapter 32-28. One was a Xianxia dress for the wedding, the other was a wedding dress for an outdoor wedding, and the other was a traditional Chinese wedding dress for an indoor Chinese wedding. Wuxia had specially hired a top stylist and makeup team. Hence, even if it was a mixed Chinese and Western wedding, there was no need to worry about the makeup clashing. It was already 6 o'clock when the makeup was done. Unspoken had just changed into the Xianxia dress when Gong Jia arrived. He walked into the room and saw that Unspoken had already changed. She stood in front of the full-length mirror and let the makeup artist put on the forehead ornament for her. When she turned around, Gong Jia was really stunned. He muttered sourly as he walked toward her. "I don't know where brother-in-law got his luck from to be able to marry my sister." He stood in front of her and looked at her gently. Suddenly, his lips curled into a smile as he gently held Unspoken's hand. "Sis, you're so beautiful." Unspoken looked at him and asked tentatively, "How beautiful?" "The world's most beautiful." "Humph. You only know how to make me happy." "How am I making you happy?" "You're so beautiful that I can't bear to marry you off." Gong Jia's words were sincere, especially when he saw Unspoken's beautiful side. He cursed fiercely in his heart. He did not know what methods Wuxia had used to kidnap his sister. "He won't be able to welcome you easily today." Gong Jia laughed sinisterly. "I learned about the process of a Chinese wedding last night. It said that the groom's family has to guard the door when he welcomes the bride. He won't be able to enter the door so easily." Unspoken asked nervously, "What are you going to do?" "Humph." Gong Jia only sneered and did not say anything. At 7 o'clock, Xiao Shui, Mu Shi, and Jun Mo arrived. They had changed into their bridesmaid outfits and had their makeup done in advance. Hua Jin also hurried over. As a member of the bride's family, he was in charge of guarding the door. At that time, they would just have to wait for the groom to come and fetch the bride. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Wuxia arrived with his motorcade. All of them were Bentleys, and the first one was his limited edition Rolls-Royce. When he reached the door, Gong Jia closed the door and gave him the cold shoulder. According to tradition, when the groom fetched the bride's family would definitely guard the door. However, if it were an ordinary family, it would be much easier for Wuxia to deal with. All he had to do was to stuff red packets under the door. Wuxia had specially given out a few hundred red packets last night. But the problem was, would these red packets be enough for Gong Jia? A certain man had already stuffed dozens of red packets through the crack of the door. Hua Jin had already filled a bag with red packets, but the Gong Jia guarding the door still had no intention of letting him go. "Brother-in-law, this red packet is not enough to open the door." The groomsman behind Mu Yaja immediately became restless. Lu Jinyu went to Mu Yaja's door and whispered, "Brother-in-law, this brother-in-law guarding the door doesn't seem easy to deal with." Jiang Shen was also anxious. "How many red packets have we stuffed? Shouldn't he let us go now?" Mu Yaja had already expected the Gong Jia to block the door, but today was a special day and he could not afford to be careless. Hence, he asked calmly, "Shao Jia, what do I have to do for you to let me in?" "Do 100 push-ups first." 100 push-ups? Gong Jia said again, "Do it in one go. You're not allowed to stop." Chapter 32-29. "Oh my God!" Lu Jinyu exclaimed. "His arms are going to be crippled if he does 100 push-ups in a row. How can he carry the bride?" Hua Jin's voice came from inside. "Not only the groom, but the groomsman has to do it too." Jiang Shen was flustered when he heard that. He lowered his voice and said, "Boss, you told me that being the groomsman isn't a good job. I really believed you." "Cut the crap." Mu Yaja handed him the bouquet. "Hold it for me first." Jiang Shen took the bouquet from him, only to see Mu Yaja lying on the floor and doing push-ups one after another without a word. Lu Jinyu broke out in a cold sweat as he watched from the side. His legs turned to jelly at the thought of having to do 100 push-ups later. Doing 100 push-ups was definitely not an easy task. Even though Mu Yaja had amazing stamina, his handsome face was flushed red and beads of perspiration were dripping down his face when he did the 80th push-up. Gong Jia counted carefully through the peephole. When Mu Yaja finished 100 push-ups, he said, "The groomsmen can start too." Jiang Shen and Lu Jinyu had the urge to run away when they heard that. Mu Yaja glanced at them and said, "What are you waiting for?" Since boss had given the order, they had to pull up their pants and do as he said. Lu Jinyu even loosened his belt and looked like he wanted to say something. He shot a resentful look at Mu Yaja before lying on the ground with Jiang Shen and starting to do push-ups. Qin Zhou felt miserable and said indignantly, "Chairman Mu, why didn't you say so earlier? Why are you torturing your groomsmen? Cut the crap. Do 100 push-ups quickly." Qin Zhou was so angry that his stomach hurt. He patted his stomach and secretly encouraged himself before lying on the ground with a long face. The three pitiful groomsmen were doing push-ups one after another on the ground. At first, they looked decent and could be considered standard. However, they gradually lost their stamina, especially Jiang Shen, who had been neglecting his exercise for the past few days. When he reached the 80th push-up, he felt that it was no longer a push-up. It was a salted fish. Lu Jinyu was the first to finish. After he got up, he slumped onto the ground and began to doubt his life. Mu Yaja thoughtfully handed him a handkerchief. Lu Jinyu took it weakly and leaned against the wall, no longer caring about his poise. Jiang Shen and Qin Zhou finished at the same time. Both of them looked like they wanted to cry. Qin Zhou said, "I've never done so many push-ups in my life." Mu Yaja faced the door and asked, "Can we go in now?" Gong Jia's voice drifted out. "How can it be so simple?" "Huh?" Jiang Shen felt a lingering fear. "Don't tell me you're up to something again." Gong Jia said, "Do another 100 sit-ups." Lu Jinyu almost fell to the ground. Qin Zhou finally understood what was going on. He moved closer to Mu Yaja and said in a low voice, "Chairman Mu, I can see what he's trying to do to you." "Oh? This brother-in-law of yours wants you to bow down and beg for mercy. Perhaps he'll let you in then." Beg for mercy? When Mu Yaja heard this, he realized that Qin Zhou had the same idea as him. Indeed, he and Gong Jia had always been at loggerheads. Now that he had such an opportunity, it was obvious that he wouldn't let him in so easily. But asking him to beg for mercy? He would never do as he wished. Chapter 32-30. Under Lu Jinyu and Jiangshan's dumbfounded gazes, Mu Yaja sat on the floor and ordered, "Someone come and hold me down." Qin Zhou immediately walked over and held him down. Mu Yaja held the back of his head with both hands and started to sit up. Lu Jinyu broke out in a cold sweat as he watched. Inside the door, Gong Jie urged, "You have to be the best man too." Jiangshan cried and begged, "Brother-in-law, spare me." Gong Jie said coldly, "Who's your brother-in-law?" Jiangshan smacked his forehead. I can't call him that." He threw himself against the door and cried, "No matter who you are, you're the gatekeeper. You can't play like this. After 100 push-ups, my legs are weak. If I have to do another 100 sit-ups, I'd better jump down from upstairs." "Just jump. It's only the second floor anyway." Lu Jinyu leaned against the door and discussed, "Brother, think about it from another perspective. On the day you get married, if your wife's biological brother stands at the door and asks you to do 100 push-ups, you won't be able to take it." Gong Jie said disdainfully, "To me, 100 push-ups is nothing. You guys are too weak." "Weak?" Lu Jinyu and Jiangshan were not convinced when they heard this. "How dare he call us weak?" "No. Prove it to them. 100 sit-ups is a piece of cake." With that, Lu Jinyu sat on the floor and let Jiangshan hold his legs down as he sat up. After everyone was done, Mu Yaja stood at the door, but Gong Jie still had no intention of letting him in. Xiao Shui ran out of the boudoir and walked to Gong Jie's side. Seeing that the poor groom had not been let in, she did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Xiao Jie, are you still not letting him in? Don't let the bride wait too long." Gong Jie said, "Help me tell sister that the bride should be more reserved." Xiao Shui, in the end, it was Mu Shi who ran out to plead for mercy. Only then did the Gong Jie reluctantly open the door and let Mu Yaja in. As soon as Mu Yaja walked in, his aura surged. Hua Jin was frightened by his aura and immediately raised his hands in surrender. "Brother-in-law, this is definitely not my idea." Gong Jie held his head high and puffed out his chest. He even said in disdain, "I'll let you off today." Mu Yaja, when Lu Jinyu saw that Mu Yaja's face was covered in sweat, he hurriedly went forward to wipe it off for him. "You must be tired, brother-in-law." Gong Jie also smiled, but the way he looked at him was very evil. Mu Yaja stared at him for a long time, his face tense for a while, then suddenly revealed a peerless smile. "Just you wait, you will also have this day." Gong Jie also smiled provocatively. "We'll wait and see." Mu Yaja walked to the door and knocked. His voice suddenly became gentle. "Honey, I'm here." In the room, Mu Shi heard the approaching footsteps and was even more nervous than Yun Shishir. It was only when Mu Yaja's gentle voice suddenly sounded close to the door that she subconsciously reached out to open the door. Xiao Shui quickly stopped her. "What are you doing?" "Ah," Mu Shi reacted and immediately retracted her hand. Xiao Shui glared at her and said, "You can't open the door now. How can it be so easy to see the bride?" "Shui." Outside the door, Mu Yaja gently called her name. "Be good and open the door." For a moment, Xiao Shui was mesmerized by his magnetic voice and subconsciously reached out to open the door. Chapter 32-31. Mu Yaja reached out and gently touched the bridge of his nose. He seemed to find the situation a little tricky. Qin Zhou, who was beside him, pushed him away. Jiangshan and Lu Jinyu immediately pounced on the door and slammed it hard. "Open the door, open the door. Bride, open the door." Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen had just hidden their red high heels and walked to the door. When they heard Mu Yaja's voice, they snickered. "Red packets. Red packets." Mu Yaja heard them and scolded inwardly, "These two little rascals. What happened to the cooperation between the inside and the outside?" He turned around and ordered Qin Zhou, "Stuff them with red packets." Qin Zhou quickly squatted down and stuffed the red packets through the crack of the door. Shao Yichen said greedily, "Not enough, not enough. You want to send us away with these few red packets?" Qin Zhou continued to stuff the red packets in his hand into the door, but he still could not pass. Jiang Shen shouted pitifully from outside, "Sister-in-law. Take pity on boss, please. Boss was tortured badly by his brother-in-law. He did more than 100 push-ups and sit-ups. He's so tired that he's about to collapse." Yun Shishir, who was sitting on the bed, covered her mouth and snickered when she heard the commotion. She had long expected that Shao Jia would not let him in so easily. How could she not know? That was why she asked Shao Shui and Mu Shi to plead for mercy. Shao Jia listened to her and let Mu Yaja off. However, there was still a hurdle at the door of the boudoir. Jun Mo asked through the door, "Groom, do you know the bride's measurements?" Yun Shishir's face turned red when she heard the sound of jeering outside the door. At a wedding, the bridesmaids were guarding the door. If the groom was escorting the bride, they would definitely come up with a few harmless questions to make things difficult for him. This question was not harsh and was just to create a lively atmosphere. Mu Yaja smiled and said, "I know, but it's not convenient for me to reveal it." "Is it not convenient for you to reveal it, or you don't know?" "Of course, I know. TSK, TSK, TSK. Shao Shui commented, "Shishir, your husband is so protective of you. There are so many groomsmen outside." "Chairman Mu definitely won't say anything," Mu said. Jun Mo asked another question. "Groom, the bride is asking you if you have anything to say to her?" She quickly defended herself. "Jun Mo, I didn't say that." "Sure." Jun Mo gestured for her, "Shishir, Mu Yaja's, I love you, Shishir, I love you." This was Mu's of his heart. Qin Zhou was to Qin. However, Qin Zhou was not satisfied and said, "CEO Mu, that's all you've got?" Mu Yaja smiled. "I'm not done yet. Held. In the past, I only dared to say, 'I like you,' because the words 'I love you' were too unfamiliar and too heavy. But from today onwards, I will say, 'I love you' to you every day. I've never been good at expressing myself, and I've made you suffer a lot. Along the way, we've been through ups and downs. Because of my personality, I'm not good with words and I don't know how to sweet talk. But, do you know? Every time I see you, my heart says I love you to you, whether you hear it or not." Jun Mo and Shao Shui looked at each other. They were touched by his confession. Chapter 32-32. Mu Yaja continued, "I, Mu Yaja, swear. I'll protect you for the rest of my life so that you won't have to wander around and have no one to rely on. No matter how difficult the obstacles are, I'll overcome them for you." Mu Shi wavered when she heard this. She said to Jun Mo, "Why don't we let the groom in? Don't make things too difficult for him." "Okay." Jun Mo then said, "However, we can't let him in so easily. Groom, why don't you sing another song to the bride?" "Sing?" Qin Zhou sized up Mu Yaja and was a little worried. "Mr. Mu, can you sing a cappella?" Mu Yaja deliberated for a moment. Suddenly, he tugged at his tie gently and sang softly. "I want to sing to you while I'm young and picturesque while I'm young and have sex my dearest person, the journey is long, let's be together I'll sing to you give me your pure and innocent smile we should be happy and blissful sunny times, I'll sing to you touch you with my burning feelings, okay time is worth reminiscing and lingering shy and blushing face who can replace you? While I'm young and have sex my dearest person, the journey is long, let's be together." Yun Shishir sat on the bed and listened. His voice was still clear through the door. He sang very well. In the past, she had always wanted him to sing to her, but he seemed to be very stingy and reserved. He was always reluctant to sing. Now, she was going to use this opportunity to feast her ears. The door slowly opened a gap. Jun Mo blocked the door and cleared her throat. "Groom, do you want to come in? Seeing that the door was open, would Lu Jinyu and the rest give it a chance to close it? The group of people worked together to break the door open. However, even though they broke the door open, they still had to consider the 3 bridesmaids in front of the door, lest they get hurt by the door. Yu sighed. Daddy, congratulations on passing. Mu Yaja was in no mood to pay attention to him. At this moment, all his eyes fell on the bride sitting on the bed. It was almost 9 o'clock in the morning, and the sun shone through the window at an angle. Yunshusher was wearing a red shioha dress as she sat upright on the bed. The gold border of her dress seemed to be plated with holy light. Her exquisite makeup, picturesque eyebrows, and bright red lips, however, did not appear to be rich. Instead, they appeared especially charming and seductive. Mu Yaja felt his body heating up. However, he knew that it wasn't because of the Gong Jia forcing him to drink 2 glasses of wine outside the door. It was because the woman in front of him was so beautiful that it was too tempting. Each of her outfits was custom-made by a famous designer. Her long hair was tied into a bun, and there weren't many decorations on it. A golden hairpin was enough to set off her exquisite makeup. Mu Yaja was looking forward to seeing her in a wedding dress during the lawn wedding. She would definitely be beautiful, dazzlingly beautiful. He slowly walked in front of her, knelt down on one knee, and presented the bouquet in his hand to her. Madam, I'm here. Yunshusher was shy and nervous as she looked at the bouquet in his hand. Her hands were intertwined because of uneasiness. Mu Yaja gently guided her. Madam, come with me. Yunshusher's gaze landed on him. Today, he was dressed more formally and handsomely than ever before. Chapter 32-33. He was dressed in a tailored suit, which made him look tall and slender. His hairstyle had also been carefully styled, and his handsome facial features had added a bit of heroic spirit to them. Even though they were together every day and hugged each other to sleep every night, today's occasion was too special. Coupled with the man's formal dressing, he looked even more handsome than before. It was to the extent that her heartbeat gradually lost its rhythm. Jun Mo reminded her cautiously, Sure, have you received the bouquet? The groom has been kneeling for a long time. Mu Yaja's affectionate look moved even the bridesmaids and they could not bear to make things difficult for him. Yunshusher then reached out and gently took the bouquet from her. Before she could retract her hand, Mu Yaja's large palm covered her hand and held it tightly. He leaned forward slightly and hugged her shoulders. Mu Yaja whispered into her ear, My wife, you're so beautiful today. Yunshusher's face burned again. She was so embarrassed that she did not know what to do in front of everyone. Yu and Xiao Yichen suddenly said, Daddy, you can't take mommy away now, okay? That's right. Daddy, you can't take mommy away yet. The group of people was secretly amused by the 2 amusing little fellows. Mu Yaja was a little puzzled. What's wrong? Here. Look at mommy's feet. Yunshusher stretched out her legs, only to see that her feet were bare. She looked up and glared at him with a red face, reminding him, hurry up and find the shoes. Qin Zhou smacked his forehead and immediately said, Groom, the bridesmaids have hidden the high heels. You have to find them within the time limit, or else you won't be able to take the bride away. Mu, she said innocently, we didn't hide them, it was the 2 little guys. We don't know where they hid them. Mu Yaja glanced at Yu and Xiao Yichen. The latter pretended to look up and did not look at him. D****. Were these 2 fellows really his sons? Not even a hint. Mu Yaja ordered, what are you waiting for? Find my shoes. At his command, Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen immediately started rummaging through the cabinets. Qin Zhou, on the other hand, was very reserved. He was not like the others who were like wolves and tigers, leisurely opening drawers to look for wedding shoes. However, things were not as simple as they thought. The room was a suite. It was very big, but she still couldn't find it in the wardrobe or under the bed. When everyone returned to the center of the room, they were still confused. The shoes were hidden by the two little fellows. He didn't know what the two little fellows were thinking and where they hid the shoes. All the places with storage functions had been searched, but there was nothing. Wuxia immediately asked, You must have hidden them. Where did you hide them? I won't tell you. The little guy was very arrogant. How could it be so easy to pry open his mouth? Wuxia pursed his lips and immediately walked over. He squatted in front of him and pulled him into his arms. Lowering his voice, he said, Good you, can you bear to see Daddy anxious? It wasn't easy for Daddy to pass your uncle's test. Do you have the heart to make things difficult for Daddy? Of course you can. You snorted. If it wasn't difficult at all, how could I let you get the beauty so easily? How could there be such a good thing in the world? Chapter 32-34. Yu pushed him away in disdain. His heart softened a little as he snorted and said arrogantly, I can't tell you where it is, but I can give you a hint. Okay. How could this guy be so smart? He even knows how to keep people in suspense. Yu walked to the bed with his hands behind his back. He cleared his throat and said, The hint I'm going to give you is, 100 years of hard work leads to a shared boat crossing. 100 years of hard work leads to a shared boat crossing? The group of people scratched their heads in confusion. Jianghu was baffled. Where's the boat here? Or is it a toy or model of the boat? Maybe these two little ones have hidden it in the toy or model. The groomsmen all gave their suggestions. Wuxia only pondered for a moment before he suddenly thought of something. He walked to the bed and lifted the pillow. Indeed, a red high heel was quietly hidden under the pillow. He held the high-heeled shoes in his hand. Only then did everyone have a flash of inspiration and come to a sudden realization. Qingzhou smacked his forehead and clicked his tongue. Why didn't I think of it? Isn't the next sentence of, 100 years of hard work leads to a shared boat crossing, similar to, 1,000 years of hard work leads to a shared pillow? It must be hidden under the pillow. At the same time that the group of people was enlightened, they could not help but be impressed by Yu's meticulous thinking. Normally, when a normal person wanted to hide a pair of wedding shoes, they would just randomly find a corner to hide it. Therefore, when they were looking for the shoes, they deliberately chose a corner and neglected the most obvious place. This boy, even when hiding a shoe, he was so knowledgeable and particular about it. This 1,000 years of hard work leads to a shared pillow was very meaningful. She could not help but exclaim, Yu is so smart, I didn't expect it to be hidden here. Junmo asked curiously, where's the other one? Yu immediately denied responsibility and said, Xiao Yichen hid the other one, not me. Wuxia turned to look at Xiao Yichen. The latter had a smug look on his face, as if he was waiting for a certain man to approach him. Daddy, do you want to know where the other one is hiding? Little Yichen blinked his eyes mysteriously, appearing extremely unfathomable. Wuxia walked over and held his chubby little hand. He said fawningly, Yichen, you just received so many red packets from Daddy. You can't not help Daddy. Say something nice for me. Xiao Yichen's request wasn't too much, so Wuxia naturally agreed to it. He gently pinched his son's cheeks and coaxed, Daddy loves Xiao Yichen the most. Yu was a little unhappy when he heard this. He snorted at the side and said, I'm useless. Daddy loves Xiao Yichen the most, so what about me? Everyone burst into laughter. Wuxia couldn't coax the two little guys to fight over Mommy's affection. However, in the end, Xiao Yichen made a request and asked Wuxia to carry his mommy and do a few deep squats. Wow! Amazing! Wasn't this making things difficult for him? Fortunately, Yunshirsha recovered well after giving birth. As she was pregnant, her figure was indeed a little out of shape when she just finished her confinement. However, she persevered and lost weight. However, no matter how thin she was, she still had some weight. Chapter 32-35. For the sake of finding the wedding shoes, Wuxia naturally obeyed. Thus, he carried Unspoken in his arms and did 10 standard push-ups. Even so, this valiant man still managed to complete the push-ups perfectly. Xiao Yichen then ran to the back of the door, took out the high heels that were hidden in the corner of the door, and handed it to him. Hua Jin, who was standing beside him, said, "This is shameless. If the groom didn't find it, it doesn't count." Xiao Yichen put her hands on her hips and said, "Why doesn't it count? I'm the groom's son. If I find it, it'll count as daddy finding it." Okay. It counts, it counts. Hua Jin held back his laughter and nodded. Wuxia walked to the bed with a pair of wedding shoes and knelt on one knee. The wedding shoes were a beautiful red with high heels and lace as embellishments. He said gently, "My wife, I'm going to put on the shoes for you." Unspoken looked at him, and he looked back at her. His handsome eyes seemed to contain a vast universe, deep and enchanting. She remembered that she had read a fairy tale about Cinderella in the past. The prince had also knelt in front of Cinderella like this and carefully put on her crystal shoes. In the past, when she was pregnant, she could only wear sneakers. When she went out for a walk, her shoelaces would occasionally loosen, and he would patiently crouch down to tie them for her. But now, when he held the high heels and was about to put them on for her, she still blushed because of shyness in front of so many people. Her cheeks, which were originally blushed, now had a charming blush on them. She shyly lifted the hem of her dress and slowly stretched out her bare feet. He reached out his hand and held her small foot with one hand. He gently put the high heels that symbolized happiness and nobility on her foot. "My wife, come with me." Seeing this scene, everyone cheered excitedly. Wuxia immediately sprinkled the petals on the happy newlyweds. Wuxia held her hand and kissed her passionately. At the side, Yu and Xiao Yichen covered their eyes shyly. They felt shy, but they could not help but peek through the gaps between their fingers. Wuxia carried her in his arms. Gong Jia made things difficult for him. He blocked the elevator door and asked him to carry her down the stairs and then carried her to the wedding car. Unspoken didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Xiao Jia, you don't have to make things difficult for your brother-in-law anymore, right?" Gong Jia raised his head arrogantly. "It's not that easy to marry my sister." Unspoken still wanted to say something, but Wuxia beat her to it. "That's fine too. I want to hold her for a while longer." He bowed his head and hugged her even tighter. He carefully carried her down the stairs. She was a little worried. After all, they had to go up the 3-story stairs and pass through the garden. He had done so many intense exercises earlier, including push-ups and squats. She was worried that his stamina would not be able to take it. Can your stamina take it?" Wuxia bowed his head and looked at her deeply. There was a hint of ambiguity in his eyes. He smiled and said, "Don't worry. I still have to save enough energy for tonight's wedding night." When she heard this, her face turned even redder. Why was this man still saying such indecent things even now? She was angry and amused at the same time. Wuxia saw that her face was very red, but it looked even more charming. He could not help but lower his head and kiss her cheek. Chapter 32-36. The groomsmen behind them could not take it anymore. Their mouths were stuffed with dog food and they could not take it anymore. "I say, you two newbies, you should stop before you go too far. Consider us." "That's right. Why did I have to be chief's groomsman? I can't take it anymore." "I can't take it anymore," Qin Zhou muttered painfully, "I want a wife too." His words resonated with the 2 single dogs, Jianghu and Lu Jinyu. A single dog is still a dog. "Chief, please be merciful and stop abusing the single dogs. You have to cherish the little animals." Yun became even more bashful at their incessant chatter and shyly buried her face in his chest. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a smile. When he turned around, his expression was stern. You guys should know when to stop. The group of people immediately shut up. He carried her downstairs and walked out of the door, only to find it crowded with people. Yun Yecheng was sitting in a wheelchair with Min Yu pushing it. He was waiting at the door. When he saw Yun being carried out by Mu Yaja, he was so touched that he could not help but shed tears of joy. Min Yu immediately took out a handkerchief and gently wiped his tears. Yun Yecheng sighed. I have no regrets in life now that I've seen Yun be happy and see her off on her wedding day. Min Yu nodded and patted him on the shoulder comfortingly. Uncle, today is your daughter's big day. You can't cry. Yun Yecheng hurriedly nodded, holding back his tears of gratitude as he looked on with teary eyes. Zhang Wansan brought his wife over. They came with heartfelt blessings. When they saw Mu Yaja carrying Yun out, they congratulated him. The little boy who bullied you that day was also present. However, this time, he came with gratitude. When he went home that night, he closed his eyes. However, Yun gentle eyes appeared in his mind. Perhaps, Yun act of kindness had completely changed Zhang Wansan's family. Therefore, they were grateful and gave their best wishes to their wedding. When Yun saw that so many people were watching, she blushed and said, "There are so many people, you should put me down." No need. But, Yun looked around shyly. Seeing so many people surrounding them and looking at them, she felt a little embarrassed. Mu Yaja said, "Ignore them." From the entrance of the villa to the main entrance, there was a long red carpet. However, this red carpet was a little special. It was covered with rose petals. From afar, it looked like it led to the Garden of Eden. A gentle breeze blew over, and the thick layer of flower petals on the carpet fluttered in the wind. At a glance, it was as if one was in a sea of flowers, romantic and beautiful. This gave her quite a pleasant surprise. Yesterday, these petals didn't even exist. Mu Yaja must have sent someone to lay out the red carpet and flower petals this morning. No wonder Xiao Shui could not hide her amazement when she walked in and said that she was especially looking forward to this wedding. She must have looked forward to it after seeing this romantic arrangement. These rose petals in sight were all genuine. It was not cheap to lay them out from home to the main entrance. He had spent a lot of money on this wedding. She was both heartbroken and touched. Chapter 32-37. However, he had said that this was the only wedding he had in his entire life. He had made it grand, not to show off, but to give her an unforgettable memory. He would record the entire wedding. He would keep this recording well. After the vicissitudes of time, when they were old and gray-haired, they would look back on these beautiful images together and feel a lot of emotions. At that time, he would tell her that he would use his entire life to fulfill the promise he had made at the wedding. He carried her and walked to the main entrance. The fleet of cars was quietly waiting for the happiest couple in the world at that moment. The chauffeur opened the car door. He carefully lifted the hem of her dress and helped her into the back seat. She shyly held his hand tightly. Under the envious gazes of everyone, she slowly rolled up the car window. Only then did she relax a little. She leaned her head on his shoulder and clutched at her heart, which was thumping non-stop. Mu Yaja looked down at her. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm just a little nervous. Later, do we need to welcome the guests?" "I'll be in charge of welcoming the guests." Then he knew that she was nervous, so he kissed her little mouth to comfort her and said gently, "Madam, don't be nervous. This is a wedding, not an execution ground, okay?" Yun nodded. The wedding venue was set at Yun Shan's poetic villa. Mu Yaja had sent people to seal off the huge holiday villa within a 10-mile radius. As the guests were all important people, the security measures had to be strictly enforced. Those who could enter the wedding venue had to have a verified invitation card. Otherwise, no matter how influential they would not be able to enter the wedding venue. The Rolls-Royce stopped at the entrance of the venue. Mu Yaja held her hand and got out of the car. The styling team, who were waiting at the venue, immediately came up to Yun Shishir and said, "Bride, come with us to change into the wedding gown." Yun Shishir's eyelashes fluttered. Only then did she remember that one of their wedding ceremonies had a lawn wedding. In a moment of nervousness, she had forgotten. Yun Shishir turned around and exchanged a look with Mu Yaja. The latter gestured for her to follow them. Only then did she follow the stylist. The venue welcomed the guests in an orderly manner. The guests entered one after another. Soon, Gong Jia arrived in the car and took care of the wedding matters with Mu Yaja. Yun Shishir changed into her wedding gown, readjusted her hair and makeup. She waited quietly with the makeup artist for the wedding ceremony to begin. A few flower girls had also arrived at the venue. Because her wedding dress was a long one, she needed 2 flower girls to hold the hem of the dress for her. When she saw the 2 flower girls, she was surprised. They were 2 blonde Lolita and a little Shota. The little Shota was wearing a suit with suspenders and a bow tie, just like a little gentleman. The little Loli was wearing a fluffy princess dress that was whiter than snow and had a flower crown on her head. She looked like a flower fairy. The little Lolita was the younger sister and the little Yun Shishir was the older brother. It was said that they were a pair of twins born to Country M's Prime Minister, Roger Alton. He had always been on good terms with Mu Yaja. When he found out that he was getting married, he volunteered to send a pair of children over to be flower girls. Mu Yaja, of course, gladly agreed. Chapter 32-38. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen arrived at the dressing room and saw the 2 flower girls. Little Lolita looked like she was about to cry. She looked so pitiful and pitiful. Yun Shishir immediately pulled little Lolita in front of her and asked in fluent English, "What's your name?" Little Lolita saw that she was speaking to her in English and instantly felt close to her. She opened her mouth timidly and said in a childish voice, "Sunny." "Sunny? What a nice name." Little Lolita politely said, "Thank you, you." She suddenly turned her head and stared at Xiao Yichen curiously. Yu Yu saw that she was staring timidly at Xiao Yichen and immediately reached out to tug at Xiao Yichen's sleeve. "She's looking at you." Xiao Yichen curiously followed his gaze and turned to look at little Lolita. She blushed and hid in Yun Shishir's arms. Her long eyelashes fluttered and she was as beautiful as a fairy. She seemed to be shy. Beside them, the little boy with blonde hair and blue eyes let out a bell-like laughter. He pointed at Sunny and said, "Sunny, don't be afraid. I'll protect you." Yun Shishir looked at the little boy and asked gently, "What's your name?" "My name is Angelo." Xiao Yichen suddenly hooked his arm around Yu Yu's shoulder and asked curiously, "Mommy, why don't you let Yu Yu and I be your flower girls?" "If it's a flower girl, there must be a boy and a girl together," Yu Yu said. "It's a pity that little sister is only 6 months old." Xiao Yichen turned around and looked at the 2 little guys worriedly. They looked to be about 4 or 5 years old. He didn't know if they would cause any trouble at such a young age. He had attended a prime minister's wedding with Mu Yaja before. The bride was also entered by 2 little flower girls. The boy held the ring pillow while the girl held the dress. The ring pillow was an important part of a Western-style wedding. The ring was tied to the pillow and the flower girl would pass it to the bride and groom. Then, the bride and groom would exchange rings. However, after entering the venue, perhaps because she saw so many guests at once, she got stage fright. She accidentally stepped on the hem of her wedding dress and fell to the ground. Before she could cry, the little boy beside her saw her fall and was so frightened that he fell to the ground and hugged the ring pillow in his hands and started to bawl. The crowd's children's, but they didn't know whether to laugh or cry when they saw how uncooperative they were in such an occasion. Even's crying, as the wedding ceremony was to continue. To the wedding ceremony to stop crying, Lolitas. Finally, you, and, she, you, to you-yous. You, to you mommy. Calm. You, he. To it, he. Tos. To the yos. Her cries of despair echoed throughout the hall. Chaos ensued. In the end, the adults had no choice but to carry the two little guys off the stage. Only then could the wedding proceed. Xiao Yichen's worry was not unfounded. Chapter 32-39. Just as Xiao Yichen was feeling conflicted, the MC came to the dressing room and said to Yun Shishir, "The ceremony has begun." Yun Shishir immediately became nervous again. The MC brought two flower girls to the venue. When Yu saw that Yun Shishir was still sitting there uneasily, he walked up to her and said, "Mommy, why are you still standing there like a fool? The ceremony is about to begin. You can't let Daddy wait for too long." Yun Shishir clenched her fists and said to him, I'm a little nervous." When Yu heard this, he smiled helplessly. He walked up to her and gave her a gentle hug. Yu is nervous too, but I'm more looking forward to it than nervous. He had already adjusted his state of mind. Previously, he had rejected it, but now, he had accepted it and even looked forward to it. This was because Daddy had transformed into a real man, a man who understood love and had a strong sense of responsibility. If he entrusted Mommy to such a man, he would definitely be able to give Mommy a lifetime of happiness. Yun Shishir slowly stood up. Yu and Xiao Yichen hurriedly went behind her and lifted the hem of her wedding dress. When they arrived at the venue, the MC was interacting with the groom and the guests. The atmosphere was relaxed. Mu Yaja's back was facing the backstage area. Facing the flower arch, the MC said to the guests, "Now, shall we invite the bride to come out with a round of applause?" Naturally, the guests gave him face and applauded. Mu Yaja held the bouquet with his back facing Yun Shishir. Just as Yun Shishir was about to walk up to him, Gong Jie suddenly stopped her and said, "Shoo." Then, he tiptoed behind Mu Yaja. The guests were trying hard not to laugh. Even Yun Shishir was amused by Gong Jie. She covered her mouth and snickered. Gong Jie stood behind Mu Yaja and deliberately lowered his posture. He gently put his arm around his waist, looking like a cute and lovable bird. It was really amusing. The MC said seriously, "Now, the groom, please turn around and face the bride." Mu Yaja was actually a little nervous. He slowly turned around, only to be met with Gong Jie's close-up handsome face. He was so shocked that he took half a step back with a look of disgust, afraid that he would not be able to avoid him. "Why is it you? Why can't it be me?" Gong Jie burst into laughter and asked in disdain. He was originally looking forward to welcoming the beautiful bride. He could even imagine Yun Shishir standing behind him in a holy wedding dress. However, when he turned around, there was a man standing behind him, and it was his archenemy, Gong Jie. Mu Yaja was so scared that his heart stopped. Good-natured laughter came from the guests. Mu Yaja stared coldly at Gong Jie. "Get lost." Gong Jie let out a cold snort and retreated from the stage. The MC immediately said, "It seems that the groom is not sincere enough to welcome the bride. I'll give the groom another chance. Now, the groom, please turn around and wait to welcome the bride." Mu Yaja turned around and stared meaningfully at the MC. Obviously, he was telling him with his eyes that he didn't like the joke just now. Yu said softly to Yun Shishir, "Mommy, it's your turn to go on stage." Yun Shishir nodded and walked forward slowly. The two flower girls immediately ran over obediently. The little Loli held up the hem of her dress while the little Shota held the ring pillow and walked beside her slowly towards the groom. Chapter 32-40. Mu Yaja heard the commotion behind him. Without waiting for the MC to speak, he turned around. However, even though he was mentally prepared, when he saw Yun Shishir, he was still stunned. He had attended some weddings before. At weddings, when some grooms saw the bride wearing a wedding dress and standing in front of them, they would be so emotional that their eyes would moisten. It had to be said that men did not easily shed tears. However, at such a moment, when the woman he loved appeared in front of him in the most sacred wedding dress, his heart would surge with emotions. Some emotions would come violently, and it would be difficult for him to control them. Wuxia stared at the person in front of him in a daze. As the sunlight shone on her body, her pristine wedding gown seemed to be coated with a layer of sacred radiance. It was so dazzling that he felt a little dizzy. The wedding dress was a strapless design, which happened to reveal her beautiful shoulders and collarbones. She wore a pink diamond necklace around her neck. This necklace was personally put on for her when he first went on a date with her. It had not left her side for so long. Originally, the stylist wanted to give her a sparkling diamond necklace, but she preferred this special necklace, which unexpectedly matched the wedding dress very well. The wedding dress was designed by a famous designer. It was tailor-made, and the waist design completely showed off her exquisite figure. On the chest, there was a white rose made of silk, and it was embellished around the edge of the tube top. It perfectly covered her breasts and made her look noble and elegant. Her ink-black hair was tied up in a beautiful bun. A few strands of curly hair hung over her ears, which made her even more charming and charming. It was different from the makeup she wore during the wedding. At that time, her face was so exquisite that it seemed to glow. Her delicate eyebrows were like the clouds in the distant mountains. Her jet-black eyelashes were long and curly. Without much eyeshadow, her eyebrows and eyes were as beautiful as a painting. Her perky nose bridge did not need any highlight decorations. It was natural. Unlike many brides who wore heavy makeup, she wore makeup but it was very clean. Her face was naturally beautiful, and after careful carving, she was as beautiful as a fairy. Especially that pair of picturesque eyes, they were like obsidian. When she lowered her eyes, the light in her eyes shimmered. Even though she was separated by a thin veil, it added a sense of mysterious beauty. He looked at her and couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. He didn't even dare to rashly step forward and disturb this beauty. Xianxia faintly smiled as she looked at him. She had imagined her wedding countless times, but the royal wedding was even more dreamy than she had imagined. Even though she didn't think much of the wedding before. After all, as far as she knew, he was the only man in her life. Even if there was no need for a wedding to prove it, this fact would not change. But, when she stood in front of him in her wedding dress, it was a different feeling. It was said that a woman had to wear a wedding dress once to be considered a complete woman. As for Wuxia, it was a completely different feeling. He had imagined such a scene countless times, but none of his fantasies were as impactful as witnessing it with his own eyes. His heart was so touched that it was about to overflow. Chapter 32:41. He looked at her with a smile on his lips, but his eyes were also sour. He had experienced countless touching moments, such as when Yueyao was born, he held such a small bundle of milk bun in his arms, and was filled with emotion. However, there was no moment more impactful than this. He lowered his eyes slightly, then raised them again, and walked towards her. His deep eyes hid a burning passion, and he did not hide his deep admiration for her. He walked in front of her, gently hugged her waist, and said in a low voice, "Xianxia, are you trying to charm me to death?" When Xianxia heard this, she couldn't help but blush. Her long eyelashes trembled slightly, and when she looked at him again, her face was slightly red. He handed the bouquet to her, and when she took the bouquet, the large palm that was holding her waist pressed down hard. He hugged her, lowered his head, and sealed her lips. Even though the MC had repeatedly emphasized that if he wanted to kiss the bride, it would be best to kiss her forehead, so as to prevent her lipstick from rubbing off and dirtying her makeup, he couldn't control himself. He couldn't care less about so many things, and didn't care that there were so many guests watching. With such a beautiful bride standing in front of him, could he still be expected to care about those rules and regulations? Yunshursher was kissed, and at first, she was still a little shy, but she also couldn't control herself, and unconsciously, she held onto his shoulders, and responded to his kiss. She seemed to be unable to hear the clamor of the crowd. At this moment, in her world, only this man, only she, could affect her emotions. Everything, couldn't be controlled. After the kiss, he looked into her bright eyes, and finally smiled. She also cupped his cheeks, and gently used her fingers to wipe away the moisture at the corner of his eyes. The two of them touched their foreheads, and looked at each other affectionately, as if there was no need for those complicated words of love and vows. The deep feelings between them were self-evident. The so-called vows were all done step by step, but some feelings couldn't be expressed by vows. She suddenly felt that those vows and promises were really not that important. Because, from his doting eyes, she saw her own future. Her future life would definitely be happy and complete. No matter if she was rich or poor, he would protect her for the rest of her life. He suddenly hugged her tightly, and the corner of his mouth curled up into an innocent smile like a child's. "You finally belong to me." Under the witness of so many guests, this person at the top of his heart finally belonged to him. Under everyone's witness, he carefully lifted her hand, and slowly put a beautiful pink diamond ring on her finger. The diamond of this diamond ring was not big, and it was probably only 50 carats in size. It wasn't that he couldn't afford an expensive diamond ring, but Yunshursher said that if it was a big diamond ring, it would often be inconvenient for her to wear. Previously, the diamond ring during the engagement ceremony was too big. Sometimes, it was inconvenient to take it off because it was too big. In her mind, she didn't need to rely on a ring to show off her status and wealth. She also didn't need to deliberately to show. And she didn't particularly like the big carat diamond ring. The diamond ring didn't need to be too big. To her, the most meaningful thing wasn't the bigger the diamond, but the longer she wore it, the better it was. Chapter 32-42. Xiao Yichen was relieved. At least the two flower girls didn't cause any trouble. Perhaps they had undergone special training, as they didn't have stage fright when they went on stage. All the guests present looked at the newlyweds in amazement. Mu Yaja was married. This man, who had always been the center of attention and looked down on everyone, actually had such a tender side to him. It was such a luxurious wedding, but it wasn't hard to see how much effort he had put into this wedding. While they were amazed at the extravagance of the wedding, they were also touched by the details of this wedding. No matter how big or small, he had done it personally. After that, Yunshursher changed into a Chinese-style Han Tang dress and entered the main hall with Mu Yaja for the classical ceremony. In comparison, a Chinese-style wedding was more formal. However, even after the touching kisses on the lawn, the guests were still jealous. The men were jealous that Mu Yaja could marry such a beautiful wife. The women were jealous that Yunshursher could marry a man who loved her so much and treated her like the apple of his eye. Her life could be said to be perfect. After the ceremony, when the guests were about to take turns to toast, the door of the hall was suddenly pushed open. The door of the hall was extremely heavy. Hence, no matter how noisy the hall was, when the heavy door was pushed open, everyone was attracted by the sound and looked in the direction of the sound. Mu Yaja and Yunshursher were originally toasting, but when they heard the sound, they turned their heads and looked puzzled. Why would the door be open for no reason? All the guests were present, and no one was left out. There were also guards outside the hall, and no one was allowed to enter. Why? Yunshursher looked in the direction of the sound and saw a tall figure standing at the door against the light. Because of the backlight, she couldn't see his face clearly. However, based on his silhouette, she could vaguely tell that he was a very tall man. From the aura he exuded, he must be a middle-aged man. She could vaguely see that he was wearing a trench coat and had an extraordinary aura. However, he was different from the average middle-aged man. He had an extraordinary aura. Even though his appearance could not be seen clearly, his aura could be felt as if they were in the same situation. Gong Jia was standing behind Yunshishir. When he saw him, his heart skipped a beat and he muttered unconsciously, "Father." Yunshishir turned pale with fright when she heard this. Father, the man whom little Jia addressed so respectfully as his father was none other than. Wuxia was suspicious, but he saw the man standing there for a moment before walking towards Yunshishir. It was only when he slowly walked into the venue that his handsome features were exposed under the lights. The man held a pipe in his hand. What entered everyone's eyes was a handsome face. Even though it was stained with the traces of time, it was still difficult to conceal that handsomeness. He must have been an elegant and handsome man when he was young. He was still wearing that British-style suit. His well-built body gave him an extraordinary aura. His eyes and brows were similar to Gong Jia's, and they were incomparably deep. It was hard to imagine that such a man's real age would be. He looked like he was only in his 30s, but after experiencing the vicissitudes of life and the vicissitudes of time, his every movement exuded a charming aura. Chapter 32-43. Yu was also shocked. He could vaguely recognize that this man was the rumored founder of the Hurricane Group, Gong Xiaoying, the head of the Gong family. Previously, Gong Jia had shown him a photo of Gong Xiaoying, and it had left a deep impression on him. Now that he was seeing it with his own eyes, he was extremely shocked. Gong Xiaoying walked slowly into the hall. Perhaps his aura was too oppressive, but the entire hall was silent as he walked in. Everyone was so oppressed by his aura that they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Gong Jia was extremely shocked. He didn't know why his father was here, and he didn't know how his father knew that today was his sister's important day. Could it be that his father already knew that he had disappeared for so many days because of his sister's wedding? So he followed the clues and found his way here personally? Yu was even more bewildered. He gently tugged at Gong Jia's hand and asked, "Uncle, why is he here?" Gong Jia looked at him blankly. Yu asked suspiciously, "Were you the one who told him that today is Mommy's wedding?" "No." Gong Jia immediately denied it. "Regarding this matter, I've never mentioned a word to him." Wuxia also saw the man's face clearly. He had never seen Gong Xiaoying before, but just from his facial features and appearance, he knew who he was. Gong Xiaoying. There was no other reason. It was because his features were extremely similar to Gong Jia's and Yunshishir's. Especially his eyes, they were similar in form and spirit. Why was he here? However, Gong Xiaoying's appearance didn't cause him much panic. On the other hand, Yunshishir was a little flustered. For a moment, she looked at the man who was closing in on her. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. It wasn't until the man walked in front of her and stopped in his tracks that she became even more flustered. Her hands were tightly clasped together as she looked straight at him. For a moment, she actually lost her sense of propriety. Gong Xiaoying was more than a head taller than her. She was 1.7 meters tall, but she only reached his shoulders. His imposing height was comparable to Wuxia. She finally realized who Gong Jia had inherited his high altitude from. He lowered his head to look at her. Although the woman in front of him was already 25 years old and a mother of 3, in his eyes, no matter how he looked at her, she was still a child. When he saw the face up close, Gong Xiaoying tried his best to remain calm, but his mind was still in turmoil. On one hand, it was because this face was too similar to the woman he had been dreaming about for decades. On the other hand, it was because the beautiful woman standing in front of him was his own flesh and blood. She was beautiful, really beautiful. She looked exactly like her mother when she was young. He had always thought that this daughter of his had unfortunately died a few years ago. His heart ached so much that he thought he would never see her again in this lifetime. However, it wasn't until he saw her face up close that he believed the truth. His daughter was still alive. For a moment, Gong Xiaoying was at a loss for words. He just looked at her quietly, wishing that he could use this limited time to make up for the 20 years he had missed. Yunshishir didn't know what to do. She was a little embarrassed by his gaze. She put her hands behind her back and averted her gaze. Gong Xiaoying finally spoke, "Raise your head." She looked up and met his deep eyes. Chapter 32-44. Gong Xiaoying looked at her seriously. His gaze fell on her brows and eyes, then moved down to her upturned nose. She looked exactly like Mu Qingcheng. Her cherry lips were charming and moving, just like in his memory. She stood on the stage, holding the microphone and singing a decadent love song. She was very flirtatious. So similar, so similar. Her appearance seemed to slowly overlap with the appearance of the woman in his memory. The more he looked at her, the more Gong Xiaoying's hands trembled. He subconsciously raised his head, wanting to touch her, but he was afraid. He was worried that this was just an illusion. Sure. He called her name. That was his daughter's name. The woman standing in front of him was the daughter he had missed for more than 10 years, the daughter that woman had given birth to for him. Gong Xiaoying could not help but feel his heart ache. The memories that had been sealed in his heart seemed to have broken out of their cocoons. Scenes after scenes flashed before his eyes like a merry-go-round. The first time he met Mu Qingcheng was at a banquet. At that time, he was a young man in his early 20s. It was the time when he was young and vigorous. He had also been a playboy and had many women. Born in a maritime family, he had traveled extensively and had seen a lot of the world. His heart gradually became wild. The reason why he came to the capital was that as the heir, he had followed his father to the capital to attend a business meeting. At night, there was a banquet and his father asked him to attend on his behalf. At the banquet, he saw her. Mu Qingcheng was wearing a gorgeous gown. Although it was in the style of the 90s, it could not hide her unparalleled elegance. Once his eyes met hers, he couldn't take his eyes off her anymore. Gong Xiaoying had been educated in the West since he was young. Hence, he was open-minded, unlike the reserved Asian men. He recognized her and extended an olive branch to her, inviting her to dance with him. At first, Mu Qingcheng accepted her invitation only because she was too embarrassed to refuse, so she agreed. At that time, Gong Xiaoying was definitely a playboy. Even though she had seen many men in her career as a singer, she had never seen such a handsome man. So much so that when she was dancing, she repeatedly made mistakes because of her nervousness. However, he didn't mind at all. Instead, he felt that her nervous appearance was actually very cute. Gong Xiaoying was also a powerful figure. After just one dance, he had already figured out her identity and background. Therefore, the story of a romantic love affair was a natural development. What he remembered most was when he asked her to go on a cruise. At that time, it was still the Lantern Festival. He had booked the pleasure boat. She wore a cheongsam to attend. Her graceful figure was charming and moving. He was a normal man. With a beauty in his arms, he couldn't help himself and had her on the boat. She had also retreated because she was reserved. After all, they had only been in love for a few months at that time. Although they had survived in a nightclub environment, her personality was relatively conservative. But what kind of man was Gong Xiaoying? After a round of lovey-dovey, he had conquered her. At night, she wore his jacket and leaned against the side of the boat. She stretched out her slender jade hands and played with the clear ripples of the lake. On the surface of the water, one by one, there were lanterns floating by. She had made a wish that she could accompany the person she loved for life. Chapter 32-45. She was not his only woman. In the past, when he traveled with his father to various countries, he had also befriended some socialites from the upper-class society. However, most of them could not hold on to him and would often be thrown to the back of his mind after the passion. It was not that he was too promiscuous. It was just that some fate did not belong to each other. However, when fate brought them together, success came naturally. At that time, he really believed that this woman would be his lifelong companion. However, later on, when Mu Xing found out about their relationship, he strictly forbade her from seeing him again. Mu Qingqing, on the other hand, had a secret rendezvous with him behind his back. She said, "Brother Xiaoying, I've decided on you in this life. You can't let me down." When he heard this, he was overjoyed. As he kissed her, he promised her, "Qingqing, I'll never let you down. With you in my life, I won't have any regrets." She even thought that he was a poor lad who came out of nowhere. She even swore to be with him for the rest of their lives, where they would have to haggle over every ounce of necessities. If not, how could a relationship be such a complicated and mysterious thing? Sometimes, decades of feelings could not compare to a few months of friendship. Although the two of them had been in love for a few months, it felt as if the world had changed. This was a special feeling. Even if he had other women by his side after that, he had never felt this special feeling before. It was the kind of feeling that, as long as she was by his side, even if the world came to an end, he would have nothing to fear. Hence, when his father asked him to go overseas to take over the maritime affairs in Asia and Europe, he agreed to leave the capital with her and go far away together. Mu Qingqing blushed in embarrassment and agreed. However, when the agreed date came, she did not show up. He thought that this lady probably regretted it and did not have such deep feelings for him that she would abandon everything and leave with him. However, many years later, when she contacted him again by chance, he was indignant. When he repeatedly asked why she did not show up that day, she broke down and cried, "Brother Xiaoying, I can't come." No matter how much I begged and even knelt in front of that man, he still refused. I wanted to leave secretly, but he put me under house arrest. I can't go, I can't go. Mu Qingqing's tears were like raindrops on a pear blossom, causing his heart to clench. Towards the Mu family, she harbored an unforgettable hatred. She said to him, "Brother Xiaoying, I'm pregnant with your sons, a pair of twins. When will you come and take me away? I've been looking forward to meeting you." Only then did he know that not long after he left, she found out that she was pregnant. After being put under house arrest, she originally wanted to protest by going on a hunger strike, but when she thought of the flesh and blood in her stomach, she couldn't bear to do so. After enduring the humiliation for so long, she finally got the chance to escape that kind of hell with the help of the servants. She tossed and turned in bed. In order to avoid being noticed, she took root in a very remote place and gave birth to a pair of twins. She gave birth to them and gave them names. When Gong Xiaoying found out about this, he threatened to make things difficult for the Mu clan. At that time, the Gong clan was no longer the same as before. It was just a small maritime family. After a few years of consolidation, under his operation, the Gong clan grew stronger and stronger. They were now completely on par with the Mu clan. Chapter 32-46. At the same time, Gong Xiaoying wanted to find her, but under such complicated circumstances, it was not easy to bring her back to his side. Mu Qingqing did not have a fixed residence. In order to escape from the Mu family, she changed places many times and led a very down-and-out life. His heart was filled with thoughts of her and the son and daughter she had with him. He followed the address she provided, but often, by a strange combination of factors, she was already gone. He was tied up with Eurasian Shipping's affairs and could not go there personally. Unable to be in two places at once, he could only entrust her and his children to a trusted aide in the country. That aide of his had some authority, so with him covering for them, Mu Xing could not find Mu Qingqing's whereabouts in a short time. Until that day. He would never forget that day. They had agreed to meet at a port, and his men would bring her back to him. However, after waiting for a day and a night for 24 hours, he felt as if he had waited for a century. Alas, after waiting for so long, she still did not appear. In the end, he missed her again. This time, he missed her for a lifetime. Instead of waiting for her, he received the news of her death. His men brought back a good-looking boy covered in scars. Due to external injuries, he had temporarily lost a part of his memory. He didn't even remember his own name, his own mother, and even his most beloved sister. Only then did he know that Mu Qingsheng had died in a car accident. The other child had also died tragically in a car accident. This child was the only survivor. That moving voice and face that he had been longing for was something that he would never be able to see again in his entire life. The man, who had never shed a tear all this while, burst into tears that night.